Despite government insisting that this hasn't happened, I would like the committee to provide an update on the enforcement on the moratorium on logging
and outline the specific measures being implemented to address illegal logging activities in all these affected regions. Mr. Speaker, number 2, I would like the committee to explain the penalties currently in place to deter or stop this illegal logging and whether there are any plans to enhance such penalties. Number 3, Mr. Speaker, I would like the committee to outline the status of reforestation programs in counties that have been mentioned earlier on, which are currently having low, critically low forest cover, and I would want the committee to explain whether the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources is collaborating in making sure that our forests are basically destroyed. Mr. Speaker, under Standing Order 53.1 again, I'm making a request for a statement from the Standing Committee of National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations on the issues of missing Kenyans and dying Kenyans who have died in countries such as Arabia, Lebanon, and Qatar. Mr. Speaker, there has been an alarming increase in reported cases of Kenyan citizens disappearing under very mysterious circumstances in these countries mentioned after leaving our country for job opportunities abroad, especially in the Gulf region. Mr. Speaker, this has caused immense anguish for their families who are left in the dark about the fate and whereabouts of their loved ones. Mr. Speaker, such a case that I have is a lady from Kisii known as Idi Mosomi Nyasinga, who died 4 weeks ago, and her body cannot be found where she was in Lebanon. Mr. Speaker, I would want the committee to provide, number 1, details of all reported cases of missing Kenyans who have either gotten killed in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Lebanon, and any other countries within the Arab region, so that we can know who amongst these Kenyans is still alive and who has not been found. Number 2, Mr. Speaker, I would want the committee to table the relevant bilateral labor agreements and arrangements that Kenya as a country and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Presidency has signed, particularly with these Gulf countries, so that we can know whether these agreements have been safeguarding the rights of our people and whether these agreements are enforceable. Mr. Speaker, number 3, I would like the committee to state the protocols in place in all our Kenyan embassies and consultancies to address the complaints, the challenges, and the distress calls and reports of abuse from these Kenyans who are working in these foreign countries. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I would like the committee to seek the state to explain whether there are any long-term strategies being implemented to regulate and monitor the recruitment agencies who are recruiting our people without any safeguards, so that we can prevent exploitation and ensure that accountability for the safety of our people as citizens who are working in all these countries is managed and our people are safe as they seek for greener pastures, since we are unable to employ them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to raise these statements.
Senator Joseph Githuku.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53.1 to request a statement from the Standing Committee on Health regarding the supply of pharmaceutical and pharmaceutical supplies to hospitals in Lamu County for the financial year 2023-2024. In the statement, the committee should investigate claims of non-availability of essential medicine in hospitals in Lamu County, despite the county government having allocated Kenya shillings 23 million and 43,842.20 cents for pharmaceutical and non-pharmaceutical supplies to hospital and healthcare facilities during the financial year 2023-2024. Number 2, provide a detailed breakdown on how the said amount was spent, including documentation on the specific categories of the supplies purchased and the quantities involved. Number 3, explain whether the procurement tendering process complied with the requirement of the Public Procurement and Disposal Act, and provide details about the awarded supplies, including the terms and conditions of this contracts. Number 4, outline the measures of the county government. Outline the measures the county government has put in place to ensure that the procured supplies actually reach the hospitals and healthcare facilities that are appropriately applied for the intended purposes. In explaining any mechanisms in place to track the delivery and distribution of pharmaceutical and non-pharmaceutical supplies to the hospitals. And number 5, state auditing mechanism in place to track the expenditures in procurement and subsequent distribution process related to pharmaceutical and non-pharmaceutical supplies, ensuring that it aligns with the actual supply needed in the hospital, and furnish the Senate with the findings of the such views. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Crystal Asig.
Thank you, Speaker, for giving me that opportunity to table this statement. And just a note to the clerk's table, kindly, I'm a person with disability. I do need a little bit more time to process things. It's not just a matter of me picking up a paper and reading it out loud. So kindly, if you could just give me reasonable adjustment and time to be able to access my own statements, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to request a statement from the Standing Committee on Education regarding the distressing and unjust case of Ms. Rachel Baraza, a 21-year-old student with Down syndrome, who was denied the opportunity to sit for her Kenya Certificate of Secondary Examinations, KCSE, by Siaka Mixed Secondary School in Bungoma County. Mr. Speaker, Rachel's father, Mr. Abraham Baraza, took the necessary steps to ensure that the school was aware of her special needs, enrolling her in Siaka Mixed Secondary School with the understanding that she would be given the necessary support. However, Speaker, despite the initial agreement, Rachel faced mistreatment all through the term, and subsequently her registration for the KCSE exams were overlooked. I, therefore, Mr. Speaker, request that the committee, number 1, explain why Ms. Rachel Baraza was
unjustly denied the opportunity to sit for her KCSE exams at Siaka Mixed Secondary School, despite Rachel's father informing the school of her special needs.
Requesting the school support and making efforts to ensure that she received the necessary accommodation and support. Investigate claims that Rachel faced mistreatment, including harsh treatment from teachers, and ultimately, the failure by the school to register her for the KCSE exams, with a special focus on any reported instances of ill treatment or discrimination due to her disability, outlining, Speaker, any actions taken to address them. State any measures the ministry intends to put in place to help Rachel and her family recover from this emotional and psychological devastation resulting from the impact of the school's action, a situation that exemplifies indirect discrimination and a violation of Rachel's fundamental rights to education, and examine the actions of the school admin into the matter, focusing on the following key areas, Speaker. Whether any formal communication was made by Siaka Secondary School to Rachel, her father, or any other guardian regarding the decision not to register her for the KCSE exams, and if so, when, how, and what reasons were given for her exclusion. Whether the County Director of Education was involved in the decision, what role they played, how they were informed of the issue, and any steps taken to investigate and resolve the matter. How the school ensures equal access for all students and whether they provide any alternative or accommodations to ensure that Rachel had equal access to education and the KCSE exams, and explain how they intend to rectify this situation for Rachel. And lastly, Speaker, state how the County Director ensures all schools under the jurisdiction comply with the laws regarding disability inclusion in education and exams, providing any steps to prevent such incidences in the future from occurring. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Asige. Before I allow comments on those statements, Honorable Senators, allow me to read this message from the National Assembly. Now, Honorable Senators, I wish to report to the Senate that pursuant to Standing Order 46.3, I did receive the following message from the Speaker of the National Assembly regarding the approval by the National Assembly of the mediated version of the Divisional Revenue Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills number 38 of 2024. The message, dated Friday, 29th of November 2024, was received in the office of the Clerk of the Senate on Monday, 2nd December 2024. Pursuant to Standing Order 46.4, I now report the message. Pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 41.1 and 154B of the National Assembly Standing Orders, I hereby convey the following message from the National Assembly. Whereas on Wednesday, the 16th of October 2024, the National Assembly considered and rejected the Senate amendments to the Divisional Revenue Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills number 38 of 2024, thereby committing the bill to a mediation committee in accordance with the provisions of Article 112(2)B of the Constitution. And whereas on Friday, the 18th of October 2024, and Tuesday, 5th of November 2024, the National Assembly and the Senate, respectively, appointed members to a mediation committee to develop a mediated version of the said bill. And whereas on Wednesday, the 27th of November 2024, the National Assembly considered the mediated version of the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills number 38 of 2024, and passed it without amendments and in the form developed by the mediation committee. Now, therefore, in accordance with the provisions of Article 113(3) of the Constitution and Standing Order 154B of the National Assembly Standing Orders, I hereby convey the said decision of the National Assembly to the Senate. Now, Honorable Senators, as you are aware, the Senate on Thursday, the 28th of November 2024, also passed and approved the mediated version of the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills number 38 of 2024. Accordingly, the bill, having been passed by both houses, will be referred to His Excellency the President for assent pursuant to Article 113(3) of the Constitution. I thank you, Honorable Senators. Now, we will entertain comments for not more than 15 minutes on the statements that have been requested, meaning then we need to agree that any senator wishing to comment on these statements will have 2 minutes to do so, because I have a fairly long list on my dashboard. Senator Sifuna Edwin.
Honorable Speaker, allow me to take the 1 minute to congratulate the team from Namibia on the successful election they held this November. They have their first woman president, something that we in Kenya are still struggling with. Honorable Speaker, you also know that there was elections in the US, and I had occasion to visit the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. So I want to also take this opportunity to welcome the team from the US. And lastly, because I attended elections as an observer in Somaliland, I wanted to speak to the statement by the senator from Meru to let him know that, in fact, when I was there, we were encouraged as a country to expand our trade ties with the country called Somaliland. Because as we speak right now, they're importing all their miraa from Ethiopia. And I got opportunity to test it, Honorable Speaker. I can say without blinking that our product is far superior. So I would be encouraging, because I am aware that the Somaliland mission in Kenya has written to the respective speakers, inviting members of this House and the National Assembly for the inauguration of the new president. I would like that list includes the senator for Meru Even if I don't have to go, Honorable Speaker, I will give up my seat because this trade diplomacy is best pushed by the Deputy Speaker of the House and a member of the enduring check. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Kisang.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I also want to make a comment on the statement by the Senator for Meru. Honorable Speaker, majority of the people from Ikembe and Tikanya are living on the cash crop called Mira, Honorable Speaker, and people have gone to school and they are leaders. So we want to ask the ministry, the relevant department, Honorable Speaker, to ensure they speed up so that the great people of Meru continue to get market to sell their crops, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, maybe it's also important that we tell the people of Meru to look for also alternative markets so that they don't rely only on one part of the segment of the market, and also encourage other Kenyans also to partake of the same thing, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, finally, the statement by Senator for Lamu, Honorable Speaker, most of our counties, especially level 1, level 2, and level 3 health centers, Honorable Speaker, don't have medicine, they don't have drugs. I don't know why the governors are not partnering properly with KEMSA so that KEMSA supplies drugs, even when they don't have the resources. While we were going through today, Honorable Speaker, on the share issue, there is a lot of debt owed by the counties to KEMSA. I think that's the reason why they are not willing to extend more credit to the counties. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Mazayo.
Asante, Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, nataka kuongea kidogo juu ya hii statement ama taarifa aliyosema mwenzangu Mohamed Faki. Bwana Spika, watu wanaostaafu, hususan ambao wamefanya kazi kwa miaka mingi, tunaona katika hali za kwamba wakishastaafu kunakuwa na unyonge ama kunakuwa na upungufu wa kutolipwa mapato yao ambao waliweza kuyaweka wakati wakija wakistaafu, wanaweza kujiokoa katika ile hali. Bwana Spika, mara nyingi tunaona watu ambao wamekuwa katika mamlaka wakienda kustaafu wanakuwa hali ya mchochole, yani hali ya mwisho kabisa ya kwamba wanaishi maisha kama ambao ni watu ambao hawakuwa na heshima zao wakati wakiwa wanafanya kazi. Na haya yote yanaletwa kwa sababu ya kwamba yale mashirika ambao yanaweka hizi pesa za watu ambao wanaenda kustaafu wanafanya madharau na wanachukua hizo pesa wanafanyia kazi zingine, na imekuwa ni kama mchezo. Kila mtu yoyote katika Kenya anayefanya kazi hivi sasa, wakati akienda kustaafu, hawezi kuwa na uhakika kwamba pesa zake ambazo amekuwa akifanya kazi na akiziweka katika hazina ambayo atazifaidi wakati akiwa amestaafu, ataweza kuwa na maisha mema. Kwa hiyo Bwana Spika, langu tu ni kusema ya kwamba wale ambao wanahusikana na mambo ya kuweka pesa za wafanyikazi katika mambo ya walimu, katika mambo ya wafanyikazi katika area zozote wanazofanya, Bwana Spika, imefika wakati sasa iweze kuangaliwa, na kama tunaweza kupata njia mbadala wa kuweza kufanya ya kuweza kuona ya kwamba wamelipwa yale mapato yao kabla hata ya kwenda kustaafu, ili mwezi mmoja, miezi miwili kabla ya kustaafu, pesa ikiwa kwa account, maisha yao yataenda sawa sawa na sambamba na vile ambavyo wamekuwa wakiishi. Bwana Spika, hayo ndio maoni yangu. Asante Bwana Spika.
Senator Chiranke. Senator Fernande.
Mr. Speaker, as I make a comment, is to warmly welcome the delegation from United States of America and congratulate them for doing a peaceful election, unlike in the last time, and also pass our regards to the President-elect Donald Trump. And I hope you will look towards Kenya this time round, and pass our regards to Megan Whitman, who was a very good ambassador of Kenya. Equally, Mr. Speaker, is to wish well Namibia and to ask them to push on with the spirit of Pan-Africanism and ask the new president to support Baba Raila Odinga to be the African Union chairperson going into the future. Mr. Speaker, finally, and I know he's winning. Mr. Speaker, finally, I was with him in Senator Otsosi's home. Finally, Mr. Speaker, is on the issue of Miraa. Mr. Speaker, we should not be discussing banning Miraa because Somalia is the new kid of East Africa community. If we want to establish trade protocols within East Africa, if we have to do balance of payment and balance of trade within the new nations, and I am cognizant of the fact that you are also in Uganda, Mr. Speaker, representing His Excellency the President, and one of the agendas is building an East Africa community where we do proper trade engagement, Mr. Speaker. If the trade partners of East Africa community, Mr. Speaker, like Tanzania, Uganda, Somalia, Rwanda, if we cannot do trade within ourselves, how will we do it with the rest of the world? I challenge the Somalian government to allow the Miraa from Kenya to access their market, Mr. Speaker. And I challenge President William Ruto, who was elected overwhelmingly as the chairperson of East Africa community, to look into this issue, Mr. Speaker, as the new chairperson of East Africa community. And we congratulate President William Ruto for being the new chairman. And I hope the Njurin Jeka chairman here, your Deputy Speaker, Senator Katuri Murungi, should engage the new chair of East Africa, President William Ruto, Mr. Speaker. Finally, is to ask all Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, you remember in conclusion, 30 seconds, your Labour Committee, the Labour Committee of the Senate, was looking at recruitment agencies who take our sons and daughters abroad. I want to ask each and every Kenyan, now that we have Department of Diaspora, to use government agencies to go for job abroad, Mr. Speaker, including Saudi Arabia, United States of America, Germany. We are getting close to 1 trillion Kenyan shillings from foreign exchange into this country. This issue of using bogus and fake recruitment agencies to go abroad will bring these problems that Senator Onyonga has brought before the House. Mr. Speaker, I ask all Kenyans, now that the President and challenge National Employment Management Authority, NEMA, to ensure they give us updated recruitment agencies that are lawfully being run in the entire Republic of Kenya, so that when Kenyans pay for money to travel abroad to look for opportunities, Mr. Speaker, they use credible, legal, and recruitment agencies that belong to this country. And whenever a problem occurs abroad, Mr. Speaker, we should put in place, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, the sanctuary. We need to have sanctuary in our embassies like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United States of America, Germany, and across the world, Mr. Speaker. Today I was told even Tanzania and Uganda is also abroad. So let us put those sanctuary places for our young men and women who run into distress. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Senator Olekina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support a few statements, and I shall begin with a statement that deals with the welfare of retirees. It is nonsensical, Mr. Speaker. You find teachers who work for over 20 years. They retire when they are at the age of 60. In fact, I think it's about time that we reevaluate this issue of retirement. Why do you need to retire when your brain is still working? You need to continue. We just need to be a bit creative on how we deal with these issues. My own sister called me last week, told me that she retired in 2022, and until today, she has not been able to receive her pension. Mr. Speaker, this House has an opportunity now to be able to reevaluate the role and functions of these retirement benefit firms. We have companies like Lab Trust. We have companies like Lab Fund. We have retirement schemes. And when you look at what their core business is right now, is to invest in real estate. They are building houses all over. They are engaging in deals with county governments where they are now saying, if county government, you have not paid us because this House has negated his role of protecting Kenyans by ensuring that any piece of legislation we draft here includes huge penalties, interest. I think it's about time that we now revisit those retirement benefits acts and amend them so that when these companies like Lab Fund and Lab Trust are owed by county governments the principal amount, if it is 20 million, it is easier for county governments to be able to pay them. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to request the committee while investigating the issue raised by the senator from Mombasa County, to consider looking at the entire Retirement Benefits Acts to see how we can be able to do away with these interest, with these penalties, and also to put a period of time when you retire, you should be able to get your benefits. There's no reason why, you know, when you leave, you now start coming to Parliament to beg the parliamentary office to pay you your pension or your gratuity. This is something which should be automatic. That money is being used to invest. Right now, Mr. Speaker, the richest farms in these countries include Lab Fund and Lab Trust. You know, why should they be, you know, carrying billions and billions of shillings, yet they cannot pay teachers? Now, Mr. Speaker, for a teacher to be able to get their benefits, they have to call TSC. TSC will spend hours going through their files, and then finally, when the file is complete, it is forwarded to Treasury. Last week, Mr. Speaker, I had to call the head of accounting in Treasury to follow up on one teacher, to say, why haven't you paid her dues? Why are they keeping all those files? You worked. When you are working, you are paying. This is your money, which was being deducted for you. So, Mr. Speaker, in fact, now the law should be recrafted in a way that if Treasury delays in paying the retirees their benefits or their pension, they should start paying interest. And since Lab Fund and Lab Trust are spending the money that they are collecting from these county governments or from civil servants in investments, we should now qualify those investments and say, if I'm retiring and you are paying me this, how much have you made from the investments that you've invested in? You know, this money should not just be sweet for these entities, and it is not sweet for the people who contributed to it. So, Mr. Speaker, I really would like to request that committee to take this matter very seriously and reopen the whole debate on these pension schemes. Why should I be contributing to a pension, yet when I retire I don't get my money? Should I not just go to a bank account and open a fixed deposit account or an escrow account where I can just be putting money so that at the time when I retire I can be able to get that money? Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to comment on the statement raised by Senator Onyonka, where he's seeking clarification on the issue of logging.
Senator Orekina, but remember there was an agreement of 2 minutes per senator making a comment.
Okay, 30 seconds?
Please.
Mr. Speaker, I wish Senator Onyonka was here because on this statement I wanted some clarity. Because he said forest in Masai Mara. I don't know whether inside the park there's any logging that is taking place there. So I'd like that clarity made. Because if it is forest in Narrow County, it would make sense. Masai Mara is just a region. You know, it's inside the park. And inside the park, there's no logging. If there's logging, I'd really like to know. But it will be important for the committee, while investigating this matter, to appraise the House on what efforts, the reforestation efforts that are taking place. We see a lot of cabinet secretaries flying to go and plant 2 trees. They probably spend about 1 million shillings to go and plant a tree. You know, that 1 million shillings, they could buy trees which are sold for 20 shillings, and they could buy many of them. So let us be realistic. You know, and actually, in fact, if you look at the carbon print or footprint, which is being created by these choppers that the cabinet secretaries are using, is worse than even the deforestation. So really, we just need to look at those things and become very serious. So I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next.
Mr. Speaker, I have a comment on 2 issues quickly because I know we have 2 minutes. One is on this issue of Somalia and access to that market by the Miraa growing farmers, predominantly from Meru and the neighboring counties. Mr. Speaker, I cannot understand why this is taking too long to settle. We have had very good and stable relations with the country of Somalia, Mr. Speaker. Of course, primarily dominated by the fact that we have been of good assistance to them. At the time where their country, they have had turbulence, Kenya has been a home to many. In fact, there are many Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, who trace their roots originally back to this country. But we have all integrated and become one people and continue to live together as good neighbors.
I do not understand, and perhaps we need the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to help us appreciate, Mr. Speaker, why Kenya cannot have a bilateral conversation with Somalia, Mr. Speaker, and agree on how to best handle this Miraa business. Because administration after the other, I remember for as long as I think I became an adult, from President Moi, President Kibaki, President Uhuru, each president actually has had to occasionally deal with interruption of Miraa business and the trade between us and Somalia without it being resolved with finality. If our flowers can access European markets, Mr. Speaker, with so much ease because of agreements that we've signed, bilateral agreements with those other countries, Mr. Speaker, this crop is not banned in Somalia. The only issue that the Miraa farmers through their representatives are telling this House, Mr. Speaker, is that there are people, middlemen, that are taking advantage of a lack of an existing framework between the two countries, Mr. Speaker, that will ensure that in the long run, the farmer get to benefit out of their sweat and not middlemen that are positioned in between the government of Kenya and the government of Somalia. It's a very fair request. Therefore, it is my sincere hope, Mr. Speaker, that finally this administration shall be the administration that will put this matter to rest and allow Miraa farmers to enjoy the fruit of their sweat, Mr. Speaker. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, is on this issue that has been raised by Senator Onyonka. I know we have a labor committee in this House, Mr. Speaker, and there are members listening to us. Part of the very first engagement that we had in this House as a leadership, and I think it was in the UAE, was actually an interaction with Kenyans living in that particular country, and they insisted on us, Mr. Speaker, that as Senate, when you return back to Kenya, can you insist to the government to have a labor management system, Mr. Speaker, that keeps up a trace of all its citizens that leave the country to go and work in other countries, Mr. Speaker, so that the ministry can actually, citizens can read for themselves, one, and know what are the rules of engagement in the countries that they have gone to seek employment in, Mr. Speaker, what their rights are, Mr. Speaker, what they are not permitted to do, and most importantly, Mr. Speaker, the government can know what are the exact numbers, how many Kenyans have left the country. Perhaps we only get to know about those whose families report that their sons or daughters have either been harmed or have lost their lives. But there might be many others, Mr. Speaker, who disappear never to return to this country. I don't think that is the intention of how good countries take care of their citizens when they go to work out of station, Mr. Speaker. Especially, Mr. Speaker, a country like Kenya, where the leading foreign exchange used to be tea and coffee back in the day. But today, in the last 10 years, Mr. Speaker, foreign remittance by citizens that are working out of this country, Mr. Speaker, is a leading foreign exchange earner for this country. Meaning, the heroes actually of this republic are those Kenyans that choose to work in other countries, Mr. Speaker, and send their earnings back home, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, we must demand through our Labour Committee, Mr. Speaker, that this matter be finally put to rest. The CS for Labour has to be invited so that we can see the steps that have been taken towards ensuring the safety and comfort of citizens that work in different capitals and various parts of this world, Mr. Speaker. I thank you.
Thank you, Emil. Next is 033 Cand ID 13. Senator Kajwang, what is this formula you have brought up here?
Mr. Speaker, I apologize that I left my card in Vihiga when we went to visit Senator Osotsi. The entertainment was robust, the beverages were flowing, and so I did not take care to come back with my card.
Is it somewhere that you can go back and locate where it is, the card, when you go back to Vihiga?
I'll struggle to find out exactly where I left it, but Senator Osotsi will do me the favor. And Mr. Speaker, Senator Osotsi hosted us to a very sumptuous event, and I want to congratulate him, our deputy party leader in the ODM party.
Yes, but I will be encouraging members to use your cards when you are seeking for intervention. It is more neater.
Mr. Speaker,
shouting point of order from the seat.
Is the Senator of Homa Bay in order, understanding order number 105 on accuracy of facts, to mislead the House about the loss of his card when the card is available with a young lady at Mbale, Mr. Speaker, a young lady who did not attend the function in Chavakali, Mr. Speaker. Is he in order to mislead the House?
Senator Kajwang.
Mr. Speaker, I would prefer that my private matters not be discussed on the floor of the House. That then could let the matter rest. Mr. Speaker, allow me to comment on the statements that have been issued. First of all, I would have loved to congratulate the delegation from Namibia for making the historic decision, very landmark decision of electing a leader who is a very well-respected lady to lead the nation. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of strength for a population that is largely male to entrust a female to lead them. And they have shown the way, and I hope that Kenya will follow suit. But Mr. Speaker, on the communication that you made regarding the passage of the Division of Revenue by the National Assembly, I wanted to request the leadership of the House, both the majority and the minority, that we have only 2 days before we go on recess. Out of Dora springs Kara. Out of Kara springs the disbursement schedule. And out of that springs the additional allocations bill. Mr. Speaker, we've got so much work to do that even if it was not coming as a communication from the leader of the majority, that we could find ways of doing kamkunjis so that we can mobilize each other. Because at the same time, we are competing against the demands of the East Africa Legislative Assembly Games. And I know many members sometimes might want to put in a little bit more of exercise. There is nothing more important, nothing more urgent for the Senate right now, beside the consideration of those 3 additional statutes. And so, Mr. Speaker, I encourage that if we can caucus even informally, so that we ensure that county governments get this money does not belong to the governors. It belongs to our mothers, it belongs to our fathers and brothers who need this money for much needed services. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Senator Murango, come on.
Asante sana Mr. Speaker. Kwanza ningetaka kuunga mkono kauli ambayo taarifa ambayo umeleta kuhusu wakulima wa miraa, na ningeongeza niseme kwamba miraa inamaanisha miraa ambayo inatoka eneo la Meru na Muguka ambao unatoka Embu na Kirinyaga pia. Na niseme kwamba wakati soko inapotafutwa ya hizo bidhaa pia ni vizuri pia na hao wakulima pia wawakilishwe pia. Hiyo ingine Mr. Speaker ni kwamba ni vizuri tumeongea mambo inayohusu wakulima wa miraa kwa sababu ni muhimu, lakini pia ni vizuri pia tutaje na tukae pamoja kama viongozi tuzungumzie usafirishaji wa miraa, Mr. Speaker, ili wale ambao wanabeba miraa ama Muguka tuweze kuongeresha, tukae pamoja kama viongozi, kwa sababu pia imekuwa ni hasara kubwa sana eneo la Kirinyaga. Mr. Speaker, wiki hii tumezika watoto wawili ambao waligongwa na gari la miraa. Kila mwaka takwimu inaonyesha wazi kwamba katika eneo la Mwea wale wanaobeba miraa na Muguka wanaua watu zaidi ya 55 kila mwaka. Sijui kazi ya polisi ni gani, kwa sababu imekuwa ni kilio kila mwaka, kwa sababu ambao wanaendesha gari za kubeba miraa kwa kasi sana, kufanya wengine wapoteze maisha yao. Mmoja alikuwa yatima, hata mpaka jana tulikuwa tunatafuta mali ya kumzika kwa sababu kamburi pia zimejaa. Mr. Speaker, jambo hili litakuwa ni la maana kama kutakuwa na manufaa wa mkulima wa miraa na Muguka kutafutiwa soko, na wenyeji ambao wanatumia barabara zetu pia wawe na haki yao ya maisha. Mr. Speaker, si wote madereva ni wambaya, lakini kuna baadhi ambao sana sana sijui shinda ni nini, kwa sababu wanaokula miraa ambao tunawaona hawakuangi na haraka kula miraa. Tampata amekalia kigogo masaa 4-5 anatafuna miraa yake bila haraka, bila wasiwasi. Lakini gari ambazo zinapeleka miraa zinapiga overtaking mpaka gari ambazo ni ambulance ambazo zinapeleka watu hospitali. Kwa hivyo ni vizuri tunapopanga hii, kama kuna airport inaweza jengwa karibu miraa ipelekwa, itakuwa ni sawa. Itaokoa muda, itaokoa uhai. Lakini tunafaa tukae viongozi wa kutoka Meru, Kirinyaga na Embu, mahali na Muguka inakuzwa. Halafu pia tukae na vitengo vya usalama na polisi wa trafiki ambao wanakaa katika zile njia. Tupunguze hizi hasara kubwa
ya ajali ambazo zinasababishwa na gari za miraa. Na mstahiki Spika, unajua mimi ni mmoja mkeleketo mkubwa wa kuunga mkono ukulima sana sana wa miraa kwa hali yote, lakini kidogo pia tunaona hasara, kilio kiko, na ni vizuri tuangalie hao pia. Asante sana mstahiki Spika.
Senator Wabua Enoch.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would want to make a comment on the statement by Senator Faki on the payment of the retirement dues for Aerotech employees, retirees. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Faki for bringing this statement because it brings to the fore a number of issues that have been pending even before this House and the other House of Parliament on the matter of the management of pension schemes and the payment of retirement benefits to people who have already served their terms. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind this House that we have a serious matter pending on the issue of the retirement benefits for former councillors. When this debate started some years back, the government then agreed to pay these former councillors a one-off honorarium and include them in the coverage of NHIF, which has now shifted to SHIF and SHA. But Mr. Speaker, since that promise was made by government many, many years ago, nothing has happened. Mr. Speaker, we are faced with a situation where the number of former councillors is reducing by the day. We are losing these people on a daily basis. When we started, we were talking about 12,000 of them. Now, we are talking about less than 10,000. Mr. Speaker, these former leaders and their families are living in squalor. They are living, and at the time that they were serving, Mr. Speaker, these former councillors did not have any kitty from anyone to develop their areas. They used their own resources to develop their own areas. Mr. Speaker, we have abandoned them, we have forgotten about them. I urge this House to remember the fate and the plight of former councillors. Mr. Speaker, secondly, one of the reasons why I was coming to this House today is that I had a conversation with Senator Roba last week, and I had the same conversation with Senator Cheruiyot last week. Mr. Speaker, I thought today we were going to be introducing the Kara bill for debate and processing. Mr. Speaker, truth be told, one of the reasons why we passed DORA in Harare last week is because we wanted to be able to deal with these other instruments to allow our counties access funds, including Kara and the disbursement schedules. And Mr. Speaker, going now into the end of the week, surely people will start disappearing, and there is ELA games coming. People will disappear. So if we can just fast track at least those two instruments, Kara and the disbursement schedules, so that these our counties can access the money and develop our regions. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you. Senator Modigi Alexander.
Asante Bwana Spika, naunga mkono mjadala ambaye umeleta katika kikao hiki cha bunge kuhusu mambo ya mradi kumuguka. Ningeomba hii mambo tumeizungumzia kwa muda mrefu na sasa inaonekana iko na shinda kwa sababu tumekaa sana tukizungumzia. Ningeomba kutoka leo ama siku zile zinakuja ukute kamati ya agriculture na kamati ya trade na kamati ya security iweze kukaa pamoja injue vile itasaidia mkulima wa mradi kumuguka, kwa sababu tunajua upande wa kilimo huwa tumejaribu sana katika Kirinyaga Embu, Tharaka Nithi na Meru, na sasa unakuta watu waendea kulima hiyo kilimo na bei inaendea kurudi chini juu ya vita ya hapa na pale. Kwa hivyo ningeomba hata kama kuna mambo ya Somali ama South Sudan na kila kona zote nchi zile zingine, mpaka tuanze hapa kwetu nyumbani, kwa sababu tunajua mrasto kumogoka ambaye iko katika upande wa mazao ya kilimo. Ningeomba hiyo kamati iweze kuangalia bei hapa inaendelea mna gani, kwa sababu ni kama bei ni kama vitu zile zingine tunalima. Kwa hivyo ningeomba Bwana Spika, hiyo mambo ikaliwe chini na hiyo kamati tatu iweze kuona vile mkulima atafaidika, na pia tunajua akikaa chini wataangalia bei ya hapa Kenya na pia wataangalia bei ya nje na pia hata soko ama market huko nchi za ng'ambo, tutapata kujivunia kama watakuwa na ile sheria inafaa, kwa sababu inafaa iwe kama cash crop. Kama vile tumejua pamba itakuwa cash crop kama kitu kama majani, kahawa, pia makandamia na pia hata vitu zingine zimepitishwa. Kwa hivyo kamati hizo zinaenda polepole sana, ndio tuweze kuona vile hawa kulima wanalima mrasto kumogoka vile hata hawa watajivunia. Kitu kingine ningeomba hizo kaunti tatu, hii hata serikali yenyewe, kwa sababu inakubali hiyo iwe ni kilimo ya hizo kaunti zote, iweze kuwa kama hiyo ile wizara ya agriculture pia iweze kujenga mapawa ya damu, ndio wakati kama kuna kiangazi ukute miraa sitokumogoka haiwezi kukauka, ndio tuweze kujivunia kilimo kama watu wale wengine, na economy ya kaunti zetu na kaunti zile zingine itaendelea vizuri. Pia nikimalizia hapo kwa miraa sitokumogoka, ningeomba serikali katika Embu, hizo kaunti iko hapo katikati, kwa sababu ya ile senator wa Kirinyaga ameongea juu ya ile spindi magari inaenda, watunjengee pahali kama ni airstrip, ndio machao ya kutoka Meru na Tharaka Nithi na Kirinyaga iweze kuwa kama ni center hapo Embu County, jengwe airstrip, ndio wale watu wanauza miraa kumogoka waweze kuwa wakipeleka county zile zingine na ama ile nchi za ng'ambo. Pia naunga mkono ile statement ambayo imesomwa Sentafaki, mambo ya pesa ya uzeeni. Bwana Spika, watu wengi wameumia sana, na hata sio ile kampuni moja ilisomwa na Sentafaki, watu wengi wameumia. Bwana Spika, unakuta mtu ako na miaka 20 anafanya kazi miaka 50 na ile 20 inakuja kuwa miaka 60, na wakati aenda kuzeeka maisha yake hawezi kufanya kusaidia familia, hawezi kufanya kazi yoyote, hawezi kunisaidia, unakuta anakaa tena miaka 2 ndio aweze kupata ile pesa ya uzeeni. Ningeomba katika Kenya department zote sinjifunze kama kampuni ambaye inaitwa Kenya Power, KenGen, ambaye Kenya Generating Company, ambaye ukienda kuwa unaenda retirement within 2 months ama mwezi mmoja unapata pesa yako. Ningeomba pia watu wengine wameumia kama KCC wamepata shinda, kama sasa katika kamati ya lepa tuko na hiyo kesi, unakuta watu ambao wameretire miaka mingi wanataka shilingi 800 milioni 800 wanje kuweza kulipwa. Mwalimu anaretire akifika miaka 60 anakaa miaka 2 anje alipwa. Kwa hivyo ningeomba Bwana Spika, ile kamati itaenda kuchunguza hiyo mambo ya pesa ya uzeeni, waweze kuangalia na pia waweze kusungumuza na Treasury, pia Treasury waweze kupatiana pesa walimu waweze kulipwa na wale wengine, na pia kaunti zetu. Hapana, asante Bwana Spika, naunga mkono.
Senator Oburu Oginga.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I just want to comment on the issue raised by Senator Nyonka. Mr. Speaker, this issue of our people disappearing in foreign lands is caused by various factors. And Mr. Speaker, it starts from home here. It starts by the recruiting agents. Some of the recruiting agents, I don't know whether they are, the due diligence is done on them or how they are selected, what regulations are there, but our labor committee needs to investigate thoroughly and find out if the regulations we have or the laws that we have regulating some of these recruitment agents is the one which causes problems. It is weak. If it is weak, then let us find ways of strengthening it. If it is the enforcement which is bringing problems, let us find ways of strengthening the enforcement and also following with the government agencies who are supposed to take care of enforcement. Mr. Speaker, there is also due diligence on the people who are going to employ people who are abroad. Some of them are crooks. Mr. Speaker, we are aware that internationally there are companies and there are people who are actually taking people to slaughter them for harvesting human organs. Mr. Speaker, this happens, and when you say somebody has disappeared, how can a human being, how can a Kenyan just disappear without being located in a foreign land? And we have embassies. We have embassies with all the people there. There are people who are in charge of intelligence. There are people who are in charge of labor in these embassies, Mr. Speaker. Before people are allowed to go and seek employment in those foreign lands, Mr. Speaker, our embassies should do due diligence on the destination of our people. And it should also be mandatory that Kenyans who are working abroad are all registered with our embassies. Our embassies should have records of each and every Kenyan working in those countries. Mr. Speaker, I know I went to Qatar, and I found that our embassy there in Qatar only has records of few Kenyans, and they are pleading with Kenyans to register with them because they don't know them. These issues only come when somebody has gotten into trouble, when they have been involved in some incidences. Then now the embassy is asked to get involved. Mr. Speaker, Kenyans should be aware that when they go to foreign lands, they are exposed. They are exposed because those are not our people. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like the committee to look at these issues wholesome. It has been with us in, year out, year in, year out. Kenyans continue to be killed. Kenyans continue to disappear. Kenyans continue to be exploited in very pathetic, and some of them live in very pathetic conditions. They go there, they are robbed of their telephones and their documents. Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious situation, and we must deal with it once and for all. The committee should investigate it thoroughly. Mr. Speaker, that is the only issue I had to raise. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The two senators, Rafael Chimela. In less than 2 minutes, you can be able to give your point, and also Senator Wakoli.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa fursa hii. Mimi nitakuwa mfupi sana katika maoni yangu, hususan kuhusu ile hoja ambayo imeletwa hapa bungeni na seneta kutoka kaunti ya Kajiado, Mheshimiwa Senator Seki. Kwanza Bwana Spika, niseme ni kinaya kuona kwamba jamii hii ya Mbirikani inaweza kupoteza hati miliki ya ardhi yao katika mikono ya maafisa wetu wa usalama. Ningependa tu kusema kwamba ile kamati ambayo itatwikwa jukumu la kuchunguza kisa hiki liweze kufanya kazi yake vyema kabisa, Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, niseme pia ningependa kuhimiza wizara ya masuala ya ardhi wahakikishe kwamba wameweza kufanya mbinu haraka iwezekanavyo ili kuweza kuwapimia wananchi wetu ambao katika group ranches. Kule kwetu Kwale, Bwana Spika, kuna group ranch inaitwa Mabeja Group Ranch. Kuna watu wamefurushwa katika shamba yao pale Mamdudu Group Ranch, eneo ya Bonje, Bwana Spika, na ningependa tu kuhimiza kwamba hata watu wa Mwereni Group Ranch, watu wa Samburu South Group Ranch, Bwana Spika, serikali iweze kufanya haraka iwezekanavyo kuhakikisha kwamba mwananchi anapata hati miliki, ndio ili aweze kuwa na imani katika mahali anapoishi, Bwana Spika. Asante sana, Bwana Spika.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa nafasi hii ambayo umenipa kuchangia. Mheshimiwa Spika, mambo ya fedha za uzeeni ambazo wafanyikazi wanatozwa ni jambo ambalo nimelitaja wiki iliyopita hapa, Mheshimiwa Spika. Na ni jambo la kusononesha sana, Mheshimiwa Spika, sisi jumba la Senate kugeuzwa kuwa kinanda miongoni ama mbele ya Wakenya, Mheshimiwa Spika. Iwezi kuwa leo ni santuri ya fedha za kustaafu, Mheshimiwa Spika. Wiki lijalo chini yako kama Spika tena unaweka hiyo santuri, Mheshimiwa Spika.
Si vyema na si haki wa Kenya kutuona sisi ni kama walalamishi tu, hatuna suluhisho. Mheshimiwa Spika, naomba tutamatishe shughuli hii kwa kuwauliza serikali kuu ya Nairobi, watumishi wa umma fedha zao zipo ama hazipo? Viongozi katika kaunti, magavana, watuambie pesa za wafanyikazi zipo ama hazipo, wanakatwa ama wakatwi. Na jambo la pili, Mheshimiwa Spika, katika usanjari huo, Mheshimiwa Spika, nimeona katika kaunti zetu fedha za afya, insurance cover, Mheshimiwa Spika, baadhi ya wafanyakazi pesa hizi hazilipwi. Mheshimiwa Spika, wanasononeka, wanataabika. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwangu Bungoma wafanyakazi wanalia. Mheshimiwa Spika, wakienda hospitalini wanaambiwa Britam haijalipa, Britam haitekelezi wajibu wake. Na mimi naomba Mheshimiwa Spika, serikali iliamuru kwamba pesa zitolewe ziende katika kaunti. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni kitendawili ama ni kinaya, hadi sasa kaunti yangu ya Bungoma pesa hazijafika. Wananiambia yule ambaye anastahili kuweka sahihi ili malipo yafanyike hayupo. Na mimi naomba anapopatikana fedha ziende kwa wale ambao wanapaswa kulipwa. Kama ni wanakandarasi walipwe, lakini watu wasilipwe ile hali mradi unaenda kubadilishwa baada ya mwezi mmoja. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni jambo la kustaajabisha. Mheshimiwa Spika, serikali za kaunti zimeanza kucheza shere, Mheshimiwa Spika, na serikali za Nairobi. Unapata mwezi huu serikali ya kaunti inatoa milioni 10 kurekebisha miundombinu fulani, na baada ya miezi miwili serikali ya Nairobi inaweka pale milioni 200. Sasa milioni 10 ni ya kusafisha, ala milioni 200 ni ya kufanya kazi. Mheshimiwa Spika, huu ni utapeli na hatupaswi kuruhusu watu kutumia pesa kama hizi kujinufaisha wao wenyewe. Mheshimiwa Spika, najiunga na maseneta wengine, mambo ya mashamba, mambo ya wafanyikazi ambao Wakenya ambao wanaenda nchi mbalimbali kutafuta kazi, alafu wanaporwa pesa zao. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni jambo ambalo hatutaruhusu. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika.
Senator Andy, maybe you can speak on the bill which is coming. Very, very nice bill. Motion.
Mr. Speaker, I will always oblige to your guidance, okay. And you know that your wisdom is always my cup of tea.
Next on the clerk.
Order number 8, motion. The report of the joint sittings of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget of the Senate and the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning of the National Assembly on the nomination of Mr. Gerald Nyaoma Arita for appointment to the position of Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya.
Vice Chair, Finance and Budget, Tabitha Mutinda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Senate adopts the report of the joint sittings of the Standing Committee of Finance and Budget of the Senate and the Departmental Committee of Finance and National Planning of the National Assembly on the nomination of Mr. Gerald Nyaoma Arita for the appointment to the position of the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, which was laid on the table of the Senate on 20th of November, Mr. Speaker, and pursuant to Section 13B1 of the Central Bank of Kenya and Section 8 of the Public Appointments Act, approves the nomination of Mr. Gerald Nyaoma Arita for appointment of the position to the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, let me start by really appreciating members of the Committee of the Senate Finance and Budget, and also members of the Committee of Finance at the National Assembly. Since this was a joint committee, there was positive commitment, and we were able to embark on the vetting process of the candidate one, Mr. Gerald, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our focus was on the basics in terms of the qualifications, the suitability, the competency levels of the nominee, Mr. Speaker. The basics that were the education in terms of the Higher Education Loans Board, the EACC certifications, the DCI, any reports, or KRA, Mr. Speaker, Office of the Registrar of Political Parties. Mr. Speaker, as a committee, through this joint sitting, we were able to verify these documentations, and I want to confirm before this House that, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Gerald was able to meet the required specifications as far as these documentations were concerned. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Gerald has over 36 years' experience in his banking expertise or sector. And actually, Mr. Speaker, to narrow it, is that his expertise comes highly from the Central Bank of Kenya. The nominee, Mr. Speaker, does hold a master's degree in philosophy from the University of Cambridge in the UK, and also holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in economics from the University of Nairobi, where I'm also an alumni, Mr. Speaker. He also holds a certificate of public accountant certificate and certification, and is a certified public secretary from CASNEB, and is also an associate of the Kenya Institute of Bankers. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to academic qualifications, Mr. Gerald was able to meet the required standards, the required qualifications of a nominee or a candidate for this particular position. There is affiliation to the bodies, the different bodies that I've mentioned, the Bankers Institute, the Kenya Institute of Bankers, CASNEB, ISPAC member, Mr. Speaker. This a vast spread of his certification then gave him not only the qualification on paper, Mr. Speaker, but also brought about his experience when it comes to his 36 years working experience, Mr. Speaker. What the committee was also able to appreciate is that this particular position has also been given to one person who was also part of the CBK team for this number of years, Mr. Speaker. It's not someone who's coming from a different organization or entity, but someone who has also been in this particular institution. Now, Mr. Speaker, the 36 years experience of Mr. Gerald comes and is accompanied by his expertise on the payment systems, quality control, Mr. Speaker, the banking supervision, banking services, and the financial market, Mr. Speaker, which is very key to this country. He holds the skills and expertise needed for the position because the experiences that he holds gives him the opportunity to be able to also adequately advise the central bank in terms of the economic matters. Remember, he's a bachelor's holder in terms of in matters economics. So with his experience, Mr. Speaker, the 36 experience then brings the blend of a qualified candidate in this particular position, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, earlier, remember, a time back, I was able to raise the concerns of fraudulent withdrawals in different banks. This is a matter that CBK was able to take up, and during our vetting process, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Gerald was able to really come out on how to curb the fraudulent withdrawals by rogue fraudsters in this country, among other nations, who have embarked on a system of online robbing, online fraudulency through the modern digital banking system. He was able to highlight on the quality control measures that he has experience on, and they continue to ensure that the over 42 banks that we have in this country are well, in place so as to ensure maximum quality control, Mr. Speaker. So the committee was able to consider the nominees' qualifications and also work experience, as I said, 36, membership to relevant professional associates, was able to keenly look at the issue of conflict of interest. Mr. Speaker, we have a bill that is the conflict of interest bill that we await for it to be tabled before this House. But narrowing it to Mr. Gerald, when we looked at these issues in terms of matters conflict of interest, Mr. Speaker, the candidate was clean. The candidate was able to respond when it came to the sensitive issues of conflict of interest, he was very averse, and he was able to show not only managerial skills, but also leadership skills pertaining the issue of conflict of interest. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, as far as this matter is concerned, the committee, having held the approval of the nominee regarding his suitability as per Article 231, therefore, the committee was able to recommend that the Senate approves the nomination of Mr. Gerald Nyaomo Arita for the appointment of the position of the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya. Lastly, I wish to also appreciate our Secretariat, led by one Gitonga and the team, Beverly, Lucy Radoli, Kyoko, the team that we really worked very closely with, that we always appreciate as a Committee of Finance, because as I always said, Mr. Speaker, Committee of Finance is one of the busiest committees. And so in conjunction with our Secretariat, we are able to work hand in hand and be able to conclude as per what our mandate pertains. I wish to request that senators do approve the report of the approval hearing of one Mr. Gerald for the position of the Deputy Governor, and I call my colleague member also whom we sit with at the Finance Committee, the young man from the county, the great county of Vihiga, of Migori. I think the Vihiga issue, since we were there on over this weekend, supporting our chair with the same honorable member, Eddie, I think the issues of Vihiga are still fresh in our mind, but we are very proud and happy for one Senator Ososi for his great leadership. We were able not only to see it in this House, Mr. Speaker, but we were able to have an opportunity to see how he painted the county of Vihiga orange on Sunday, which really affirms his leadership skills are not only in this House, but also on the ground. I now call Senator Eddie Gishero to second this particular report. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Tabitha, this House might be interested to know what transpired in Vihiga. We might be forced to select a committee, a special committee, to investigate the activities in Vihiga of the senators who are there. You have the Senate, the wallets were lost, the cans, and now also you are confusing the senator for Migori cans from Migori, not Vihiga. So, Senator Andy, don't give us big experiences, but just second the motion.
Mr. Speaker, why is it that you are careful if I want to give you experience in Vihiga? It has become a matter of concern. I can assure you that, Mr. Speaker, there was no any problem. If there was any losses, it was just a lack of individual keenness, personal responsibility. But in terms of the event, the way it was organized by Senator Osotsi and his team, it was marvelous. Representation of what ODM as a party is always, a very organized and a high-level party in the entire continent. But that said, Mr. Speaker, I think I'm here to second, and I do second this particular report by the Senator, Senator Tabitha. And Mr. Speaker, this is basically a routine report because of the fact that once the two houses canvassed around the presentation of the gentleman, Mr. Gerald, who is, was forwarded to us, Mr. Speaker, for this position of Deputy Governor of CBK, then it just becomes a routine report. I think so, and especially because my sister, Senator Tabitha, has really emphasized on the character of the person and the presentation of the person, the nominee, to the extent that that merits the person that we as a country envision to be a member of, the monetary policy committee, because this is a place that is going to sit in as much as going to be a CBK deputy governor. The biggest thing is also that he's going to be a member of the CBK monetary policy committee. And Mr. Speaker, what I wanted to just stress is that where we find ourselves today as a country, even as we take in newer people into the central bank, of course, he's not new in central bank, he has worked there for over 15 years, but in this particular role, he's going to be new in that role. He's also going to be new in the MPC. And Mr. Speaker, what I wanted to stress is that our central bank at this point in time really needs more capacity in terms of human resource to rethink the entire monetary policy at the CBK level. Because, Mr. Speaker, even as we speak right now, the world is run by nanotechnology. The world is at a place where financial services have reached a point whereby we've got fungible assets and invisible assets. Even as we speak right now as a country, we haven't figured out our own crypto assets and cryptocurrency, both regulation, laws, and frameworks that can make us compete in a global world where these innovative and new technological aspects of financing are coming fast and vast. Mr. Speaker, there are countries today that are using things like virtual Visa cards, and Mr. Speaker, we are not there yet. In as much as we have made a leap in the M-Pesa revolution, which I was actually proud that the nominee was among the team that was keen to make sure that M-Pesa works and people can be able to exchange money on the interface of a mobile phone. Even though we have made serious strides as a country on M-Pesa front, we are still lagging behind on this innovative, and very complex, dynamic financial assets and virtual assets. And this is very important for us as a country to start reflecting. Another reflection, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to put very closely is on this management of our monetary policy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you will know that in October, the central bank passed their CBK rate at 12. But you're not seeing a corresponding element in our commercial banks. Our commercial banks are still lending at very crazy interest rates that do not still allow businesses to be able to, borrow from these commercial banks. I would want to see innovation, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the management of central bank, whereby even something like the CBR can be used as a formula in terms of the requirement of how the commercial banks end up lending people money. Because, Mr. Speaker, we have seen a serious crowding out effect, given that we are still having a proper problem in terms of our debt management crisis in the country, where the government is still forced by circumstances to still borrow more domestically. Then there needs to be an incentive from a monetary policy perspective, Mr. Speaker, that can be able to enable more businesses access credit. Because it's only when the business access credit that the country can move forward, we can make more taxes by having a bigger tax base, by more businesses, creating a framework for them to access money and do better businesses, Mr. Speaker. The last thing that I wanted to say, Mr. Speaker, is that while there is importance to look at what is happening at the central bank, Mr. Speaker, it's also very important for us as a House, because now I've gotten this opportunity, this is what I wanted to talk about in my previous opportunity, that we as a House must be able to work really, really hard in the next 2 days. Because in the next 2 days, if you don't figure out CARA, particularly, Mr. Speaker, and the disbursement schedule, Mr. Speaker, our counties are going to suffer massively. Because as the Chair of Finance and Budget will tell you, Mr. Speaker, currently we are only depending on the advisory of the Attorney General for counties to access money using, regulation number 134 of the PFM, which says that in the event that we have got this problem, then counties can access up to 50% of previously allocated resources. Now, that window is going to close in this December. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to bore you much with a lot of conversation about this nominee, because I second and I hope that the House will approve this. But I wanted to urge fellow senators, on behalf of the Finance Committee, on behalf of my very hardworking chair, my very hardworking vice chair, that the next 2 days, there is temptation to actually, perhaps some members want to leave early to start making their way to Mombasa for Yala. But I wanted to urge the entire House that there's a complexity in passing this particular bill, because this is not ordinary. We are not going to pass it with the normal 24 mark of the delegation that we always do. This requires that we must have 2/3 of the House to be able to actually adopt a memorandum by the President. So it will be very important that tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, hopefully that we can be able to have this bill moved today by the Chair of Finance and Budget. But for tomorrow and Thursday, let members try as much as possible to be in the House so that our counties don't lack money. And Mr. Speaker, you know that we are sending this House for only one thing, to protect counties. The biggest case for protecting counties are actually passing mainly those two bills, the DORA and CARA. And of course, also goes with the disbursement schedule, Mr. Speaker. So this is what I wanted to urge the House to focus on, even as they approve this nominee. I want to urge the House to focus so much on making sure that our counties will not start January without money and will not start January struggling to get their portion of the exchequer releases. With that, Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I humbly support this as a second. Thank you.
Honourable Senators. Honourable Senators, I propose the question that the Senate adopts the report of the joint sittings of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget of the Senate and the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning of the National Assembly on the nomination of Mr. Gerald Nyaoma Alita for appointment to the position of Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, laid on the table of the Senate on Thursday, 20th November 2024, and pursuant to Section 13B1 of the Central Bank of Kenya Act and Section 8 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act, approves the nomination of Mr. Gerald Nyaoma Alita for appointment to the position of the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya. Senators, now you can be able to contribute. First is Senator Mwihaji Mohamed.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii kuchangia mswada wa hoja ya kukubali uteuzi wa Bwana Gerald Ayoma Arita kama naibu mkurugenzi wa Benki Kuu ya Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, ripoti ya kamati iko wazi kwamba Bwana Ayoma alikuwa amehitimu katika chuo kikuu cha Nairobi ambapo alipata shahada ya Bachelor of Arts kwa masuala ya arts. Vile vile akaenda chuo kikuu cha Cambridge ambako alifanya vizuri sana, hata akapewa shahada maalum kwa sababu ya ile bidii yake ambayo ilimfanya kuwa mwanafunzi wa kwanza katika chuo kile wakati wa mwaka huo. Mheshimiwa Spika, vile vile akahitimu kama mhasibu, yani accountant, na vile vile amefanya kazi katika Central Bank kwa zaidi ya miaka 30, Mheshimiwa Spika, mpaka alipostaafu hivi majuzi kama mkurugenzi wa masuala ya uangalizi wa banki hiyo. Mheshimiwa Spika, kama ilivyosemwa na kamati ni kuwa Central Bank ama Banki Kuu ya Kenya ni taasisi muhimu sana katika nchi yetu ambayo inasimamia uchumi wa nchi hii, inasimamia fedha na hali ya nzima ya mchakato wa uchumi katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, uwepo kwa uongozi ambao una tajiriba kubwa kama hii utasaidia pakubwa Mheshimiwa Spika kuweza kuendeleza hii banki ili uchumi wetu uweze kuimarika na vile vile pia kuwe na hali ambayo inawapa wawekezaji ile tunaita confidence kwamba wakiwekeza katika nchi yetu ya Kenya, Mheshimiwa Spika, itakuwa ni nzuri na vile vile pia ni maendeleo kwa nchi yetu ya Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, nchi yetu inataka wawekezaji hivi sasa kwa sababu yale masuala ya kwenda kuomba mikopo na misaada, Mheshimiwa Spika, hiyo imepitwa na wakati. Sasa ni lazima tulete wawekezaji ili uchumi wetu uweze kukua, tuweze kuajiri watu wengi, vijana wanaomaliza vyuo vikuu na taasisi zingine ili uchumi uweze kuimarika. Mheshimiwa Spika, ningegusia tu mambo mawili matatu ambayo nimeona kwamba yako katika uchumi wetu kwa sasa. Mheshimiwa Spika, tumeona kwamba Banki Kuu imeweza kushukisha riba ya mikopo, lakini Mheshimiwa Spika, benki nyingi riba yake iko katika 23 kwa 120, wakati Mheshimiwa Spika, Banki Kuu imeweza kutoa mwongozo kwamba mikopo iweze kushuka. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, tunatarajia kwamba uteuzi wa Bwana Ayoma kama naibu wa mkurugenzi wa Banki Kuu utasaidia pakubwa kuweza kuzisukuma hizi benki za biashara ziweze kupunguza riba, ili wananchi waweze kupata mikopo ya rahisi, waweze kufanya biashara na vile vile kupanga maendeleo tofauti katika maeneo yao. Mheshimiwa Spika, jambo la pili ni kuwa Bwana Ayoma ndiye alikuwa msimamizi wa benki wakati huduma ya M-Pesa ilipokuwa inasajiliwa kwa mara ya kwanza katika miaka 2000. Mheshimiwa Spika, alijieleza kwa ufasaha kwamba yeye ndiye alichukua jukumu la kupendekeza kwamba huduma ya M-Pesa ipewe leseni. Mheshimiwa Spika, na baada ya hapo tumeona mabadiliko makubwa yamefanyika katika huduma za fedha za kidijitali. Kwa hivyo basi, Mheshimiwa Spika, lazima pia tumpe kongole kwa uamuzi huu wa majukumu hilo ambalo alichukua yeye binafsi kupendekeza kwa mkurugenzi wa Banki Kuu wakati huo kuweza kuiandikisha M-Pesa kama njia moja ya kutuma pesa. Mheshimiwa Spika, tumeona vile vile kwamba M-Pesa imeweza kusambaa ulimwengu mzima hivi sasa, na kila sehemu matumizi ya pesa kwa njia ya dijitali yanazidi kukua. Mheshimiwa Spika, kuna mambo mengi ambayo mapya yanatakana kuja katika mfumo wetu wa fedha, na haya yote Mheshimiwa Spika, tuna imani kwamba Bwana Ayoma atapasaidia pakubwa kuhakikisha kwamba hizi mbinu mpya za biashara, mbinu mpya za fedha, fedha hizi zinazoitwa kama cryptocurrency na Bitcoin, Mheshimiwa Spika, zitaweza kutumika ili kuweza kupanua uchumi wetu. Mheshimiwa Spika, soko la fedha likipanuka, ina maana kwamba uchumi wetu pia utapanuka, na hivyo basi itakuwa ni faida kwa Wakenya ambao wanastahili kupata huduma hizi ambazo ziko sehemu nyingi za ulimwengu, na vile vile pia Wakenya waweze kuzitumia, waone kwamba fedha zao pia zinakuwa. Kwa hayo mengi, Mheshimiwa Spika, naunga mkono ripoti hii.
Asante. Senator Olekina Ledamo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I equally rise to support the report from the Joint Committee of the Finance and Budget Committees in approving the nominee to serve as the second Deputy Governor of Central Bank. Mr. Speaker, I listened to part of the committee members asking questions. And one of the things that really all Kenyans are going to be asking is how do we put money back into their pockets? And I believe the then candidate who we are now discussing answered that the answer lies in lowering interest rates. There's a lot that is happening in this country, Mr. Speaker. And I hope that this current nominee will approve, and I hope that this Senate will approve him, will be able to look at the informal sector and how the informal sector is attacked by unscrupulous microfinance entities that loans this money, to people who are poor, and they end up paying interest rates of almost 100%. Mr. Speaker, you'll find that people in the informal sector and also people just in rural areas will be told to borrow money through mobile apps. And once they borrow that money from mobile apps, they end up paying so much money in terms of interest. I believe that it is time that Central Bank relook at the policy on lending institutions. From tier 1 bank, tier 2, tier 3, and also down all the way to these micro enterprises, and also these small lending institutions which are there. There's another discussion, Mr. Speaker, because I listened keenly to what Gerald was saying, that when Safaricom, when Michael Joseph thought of introducing M-Pesa, He met him and they discussed about the introduction of M-Pesa services, which now everyone here depends on M-Pesa. At that point, no one really had the vision, had seen it ahead, like 20 years ahead, to see how far the development or innovation of M-Pesa would be. But today, Mr. Speaker, M-Pesa is a financial institution. It has got nothing to do with telcos. It is essentially a financial institution. And I think it's about time that we delink the telco or telcos from financial institutions so that it can be regulated 100% by central bank. Because right now, when you're looking at the regulations that a company like Safaricom goes through, there's some which with the central bank, there's some with the ICT authority. So I think it's about time that we look at the whole issue. What is also important, Mr. Speaker, is that earlier today, a staffer from my office told me that when they went to one of the financial institutions that is now has been nominated to receive SHA payments, they were told that they can only pay using cash, that they cannot pay with a check. Then it begs the question, why do we have check payments as one of the modes of payment? So, Mr. Speaker, it is important that central bank get the correct answers from DTB Bank, from KCB Bank, who are sending away institutions that are paying by checks, telling them that unless you have an existing account with that bank, they will not accept a check from any other financial institution. It is also important to streamline on how government services should be paid for. If we are paying everything on each citizen, then we need to figure out how we account for that, because in Parliament, we are told today that all payments should be made using checks. Then when you go to government institutions, they tell you, no, we need you to do what? To pay in cash. So when in an office or an officer is given money and he has to pay, that money is written under their name in the form of imprest, tomorrow the auditors will come and say, this officer collected so much money on imprest, forgetting the context in which that money was collected. So I think it is imperative that when we have these monetary policies, they cut across. One of the things that I hope that Gerald will be able to assist the governor in determining has got to do with this issue that had been introduced in this country on how much interest a financial institution can be able to charge. Businesses were thriving, Mr. Speaker, when we knew that banks should only charge a maximum of about 4 points above the base lending rate. So if the base lending rate is around, that is set by central bank, if it is 10%, now it is 12% now, we should revisit the discussion of reintroducing a maximum points that a bank can be able to charge for interest. That is how you encourage a young economy to be able to grow. That is how you encourage money to be able to circulate. But, Mr. Speaker, when you have a credit lending system in a country, which is not fully defined, you'll find that someone will rush to a financial institution and get a loan, and because the loan will be on a reducing balance, by the time they end up paying that loan, throw away the induplium rule, throw away any other rule that has got to do with protecting the lender and also the borrower. They will be told, this is how much you'll pay, and if you don't pay, we'll come and auction you. So I think we need to put some discipline, allow this country to develop. You know, we want to encourage youth to be able to open businesses. But if a youth is opening a business and they go to a bank and they ask for a loan and they are given the interest rate as 20%, you know, 20%. But by the time they are paying that loan, that interest rate, because it is on a reducing balance, has gone up to like almost 36 or 40%. We need to have control. We need to find a way that we can encourage financial institutions to do clean business. There's a lot of punky business out there with this financial institution. You know, if today, Mr. Speaker, you ask these financial institutions, particularly those in Tier 1, to be able to publish their NPL, you'll be surprised, you'll be shocked. Especially these financial institutions that are trading in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, you know, even South Sudan, you will find that for them to balance their books, maybe their bank in Rwanda is doing better than Kenya. But you'll hear them saying that we've made so much profit this year. But if you now go into the details, they always say the devil is in the detail, you'll find that the NPL, the non-performing loans portfolio of particular banks, especially those banks in Tier 1, is unbearable. There are people who own, some of them owns like 3 or 4 billions, but you'll not see that because there is a business. In fact, Mr. Speaker, if you work a lot with financial institutions and you borrow money and you take a loan, you will find that if you delay in paying in 2 months, that bank will be after you like no one's business. They will call you and call you and call you. If you happen to dodge them, when you hit the 3rd month, the calls reduce. On the 4th month, you will not get any call. So ask yourself what happens. That money, whatever loan you owe, is now put into a suspense account. You know, it can either be one that is written off, that does not really allow this financial institution to present their actual position. So when they're performing, when they're calculating their performance or trying to demonstrate how they made profit, they don't consider that money which is in the suspense account. Then something interesting happens again. You find in international institution that comes in and purchase and buy those loans. So the people who now be forcing you to pay loans are people who have already bought that loan for them to be able to go now and follow you and you end up paying. So I think we need to be clear. We have a young economy that with good leadership from the governor and this distinguished fellow who we are now approving or debating to approve, a man who has served central bank or the financial institution in this country for 36 years is not someone who you can just wish away. I think it's about time now that we encourage this kind of meritocracy. You know, he's being nominated because he's got content. He has been able to work and seen all these different governments come, all these different policies come. So it's about time that we look at everything that we're doing, allow meritocracy, support this individual, but also when he sits there, just because you're seated up there and you are not now hanging out with the technocrats who discuss what is happening on the ground, maintain the same principle of wanting to see a better country. It is important that we have good monetary policy. I long for the time, Mr. Speaker, that will say Kenya as a country is going to be not only the center of gravity financially for the East African region, but a country that a lot of people will come here, people will be able to live here peacefully, enjoy. Mr. Speaker, I know you come from Meru, and the economy of Meru has got to be supported, and particularly in the miraa industry. We see young people, allow them to be able to sell. I long for the time when we can actually even be talking about, you know, other things, which maybe if I mention here, my other brother will look at me and say, what are you talking about? You know, you see, when you look at marijuana, they are all different issues, and it's a big economy there, but not particularly, I'm not equating it with miraa. You know, there is CBD oil, which is used, we go to see a lot of different products, it's used in hospitals. So there's a lot that we can actually be able to discuss and support with a good monetary policy, one that is predictable. You know, we don't want a system where people are saying, oh, you know, your tax system is not predictable. Because today you have these policies, tomorrow you have this other policy. But when we have, you know, a central bank policy, policies that can be able to help an economy grow, we will go very far, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, finally, on this issue of overnight lending, I think it's about time that the leadership at central bank will look at it. Some financial institution will even tell you at the end of the month, don't pay yet, because banks will be doing overnight lending, you know? So that overnight lending sometimes affect businesses, because banks will want to have a lot of liquidity so that at the end of the month they can do the overnight lending, make more money, and it affects how people are able to do their business. So in summary, 3 key important issues that I hope that Gerald will put his experience is, number 1, how do we ensure that we regulate these other lenders who are not regulated? I think we should put everyone to be regulated by central bank. You know, if you leave out such that you can just come up with an app and lend money, it is not something which is going to help this country grow. Secondly, it is about time that we have a discussion on how we treat M-Pesa, on how we treat maybe Airtel money. Let them establish financial institutions. You know, have a bank which is called M-Pesa, such that we can have ATMs that you can go withdraw and deposit. Currently with M-Pesa, with ATMs, you can only withdraw, but you cannot deposit at the ATMs. So we need to be able to advance that further. We are now at a time when we fully regulate it, allow it to be able to work well, and then they can also, you can actually be able to have it as a bank statement. I know a lot of institutions now, when they lend money, they allow Kenyans to submit their M-Pesa statements, but it's a better way that even for people to be able to develop, you can show that I'm only banking with M-Pesa because it works better, because that money will be able to go into the rural areas. And then interest rates. The last thing, which is very, very key, and I hope that you will take this seriously, is the issue of reintroducing the best, the points maximum of about 4 points above the best lending rate. That in itself, it may not be very attractive to local financial institutions, but you'd rather have good books rather than you hiding your NPL because you want to show that you're making a lot of money by overcharging people, you know, high interest rates, them not paying for the loans that they have taken. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I support.
Thank you. Next is the leader of the majority party, Senator Allen.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this report. Very good report actually by our Budget and Finance Committee. I have not hidden the fact of my admiration for this committee over the years that have served as majority leader, Mr. Speaker, maybe stemming from the fact that it's one committee that I served for the longest time as a senator, and I know how much work they get to do. Mr. Speaker, first is to appreciate them for the good job that they've done. I hope one day, Mr. Speaker, when we eventually clean up this constitution, we will actually be able to distinguish between Parliament and National Assembly. Because there are so many instances, Mr. Speaker, where the Constitution actually intended to say Parliament, but has ended up saying National Assembly. And it's only on rare occurrences such as this, Mr. Speaker, this particular item, where the words were used interchangeably, perhaps because of a typo or some of the editors, Mr. Speaker, were not keen enough, or may have been keen, Mr. Speaker, that we have a chance and an opportunity to hear the approval of certain key government official, Mr. Speaker. This alongside the IG and I think one or two others. That, I don't think, is what Kenyans intended when they went to the polls in August 2010, Mr. Speaker, to bequeath themselves a new constitution. Therefore, I rise to approve the good job that was done by our colleagues on the approval hearing of Mr. Gerard Nyaoma Arita, a gentleman who has a fairly rich resume, Mr. Speaker. Went through a competitive process, Mr. Speaker, and both committees of the House have actually sat down to listen to him. And in their words, they think that the gentleman fits the bill. And if he fits the bill, then we can go ahead and approve him. Mr. Speaker, I have noted that EACC actually did grant him clearance. We need to, Mr. Speaker, give effect to Chapter 6 of our Constitution. Apart from just EACC saying we have no case with Senator Ledama Olekina, Senator Eddy, I look forward to a time, Mr. Speaker, where we will grant them actual power to either, on account of very strong findings that they have made, recommend either to Parliament, to the judiciary, Mr. Speaker, or even to the executive, the debarment from holding public office of certain individuals. We need to go beyond this ritual of just seeking a clarification because you have been nominated for a job Mr. Speaker, and say, oh, this is what we have found out about you, that we have no case against such and such a gentleman. But nonetheless, Mr. Speaker, this gentleman was approved. KRA also granted tax compliance, Mr. Speaker. HELB to confirm that he has cleared his HELB loan. Mr. Speaker, I'll not be shocked that the younger members of this House, like Senator Eddy, perhaps have not cleared their HELB loan. I don't know if he took it up, but I know, Mr. Speaker, for a while, I must be honest about this, that even me, it was only in my second term of Parliament that I actually cleared my HELB loan, despite the fact that I could easily have written the first paycheck upon the clearance, upon actually assuming office as a senator, but it took me a while, and I appreciate the fact that this forms part of what we seek from those that take public office. You know, this conversation on, Mr. Speaker, on university funding model cannot be complete, Mr. Speaker, without the conversation of how many citizens actually benefited, and today don't make a simple effort, Mr. Speaker, to pay. You may not be having a job, Mr. Speaker, but at least reduce on it. Occasionally, you have a windfall, or you've done a project somewhere and you've been handsomely paid, Mr. Speaker. Send 5,000-10,000 shillings. It goes into growing this fund, Mr. Speaker, because at the end of the day, this conversation about bans is just about money at the end of it. If we had a significant proportion of money at HELB, had a good amount of money at their disposal, that would be need for band 2 to band 5. We'd put everybody in band 1 and pay for them, Mr. Speaker. But because, Mr. Speaker, we have resources competing, Mr. Speaker, at the national level, where we have to fund various government items, then we only have to make do with what is available. But over and above what is available, Mr. Speaker, we need those that have benefited from HELB, Mr. Speaker, to make an effort and ensure that it's not only until they have been nominated or granted an opportunity to serve in an office, such as the gentleman that was being vetted here, Mr. Speaker, that they actually quickly dash to clear their HELB loans, Mr. Speaker. Of course, I am aware that there are many who would have wished to pay, but they haven't been able to secure jobs, Mr. Speaker. But more importantly, because we know, and you can see the hue and cry that is in the country amongst our college and university students, Mr. Speaker, on the need for HELB to be properly resourced so that they can continue to fund and make education a bit more affordable, Mr. Speaker, at post-secondary level, then we have to pay. The DCI also granted the criminal certificate of good conduct, a process that is, Mr. Speaker, something which I don't know what you're going to do about this, Mr. Speaker. But I find it to be extremely archaic, Mr. Speaker, what you have to go through to get a DCI good conduct approval. I see occasionally, Mr. Speaker, like I think amongst the last days of President Kenyatta, Uhuru, I saw him launch, I think, a forensic lab or something. When are we going to make that information distributed across the various parts of the country, Mr. Speaker, as such that citizens can get good conduct within a matter of hours, Mr. Speaker? Because I believe that they have copies of these records of who are the criminals, Mr. Speaker, and if not records, then if not hours, then at least 1 or 2 days, Mr. Speaker. But the truth of the matter, Mr. Speaker, is that when you apply for good conduct nowadays, the minimum wait time sometimes even runs into months without getting approval. Many young people are missing job opportunities on account of lack of good conduct. For example, in my county, Mr. Speaker, when they are recruiting people to work in the multinationals, tea estates, and you know most of those jobs, Mr. Speaker, they recruit on a quarterly basis. Sometimes your good conduct expires midway, and because these people work extremely hard from Monday to Saturday, they don't get the time even to apply, or by the time they're applying, Mr. Speaker, when the next renewal of their contract comes, they're out of a good conduct, Mr. Speaker. And to get it is so much trouble. If there's an institution, Mr. Speaker, and I want to believe that when our colleagues in the National Assembly get to vet the next Minister for Interior, Mr. Speaker, when that opportunity presents itself, or even when he comes to this House, Mr. Speaker, to answer questions next session, part of the things we must demand of the person, the gentleman or the lady that will serve as the next country's Minister for Interior, Mr. Speaker, is to give a policy direction on what will be the quickest turnaround time for citizens to acquire, or what will it take for citizens to acquire good conduct within a maximum of 7 days at most, Mr. Speaker. Because there are many Kenyans that are missing job opportunities on account of this certification, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, now to the more important issues is on the issue of the resume of this particular individual, that this nominee actually has 36 years experience. So basically, my entire life, less 2 years, he has been in the banking industry, Mr. Speaker, and has handled issues such as payment system, quality control, banking supervision, banking services, and financial markets. There's only one thing that I'd hope that Senator Eddy, because I know you served in budget and finance, I don't expect Senator Faki to ask this, but because you're young and dynamic, I have scanned through your report. I wanted you to have asked this gentleman what is his view on regulation of cryptocurrency in this country. Unfortunately, that question wasn't captured. Because, Mr. Speaker, many countries that are more liberal in their thinking are beginning to live within the realms of reality and accepting that there are many people that are trading on Bitcoin, binary assets, Mr. Speaker, and it is important that CBK leads a conversation. If you ask them today, Mr. Speaker, chances are they'll tell you, oh, we formed a working committee. Working committee in government circles is what governments do when they don't want to handle anything, Mr. Speaker. You form a committee, and therefore, anytime even Parliament asks, what are you doing about this particular issue, they'll tell you, oh, there's a committee that we have put together. It is my hope, Mr. Speaker, that CBK will take the bold decision, Mr. Speaker, and lead the country in having a conversation, Mr. Speaker, about what to do with the crypto. Yes, because I know he serves, he was part of those that interviewed this gentleman. I'm sure he has useful information.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to inform Majority Leader that the issue of cryptocurrency and virtual assets was one of the critical issues that we explored in the committee. However, as you know, these committees, there was time limit to the extent that I wasn't able to explore that at the committee level when we were discussing this. But maybe you were not here when I was seconding this particular motion. When I was seconding, the bulk of my conversation was the issue of innovation and dealing with cryptocurrency and virtual assets, because I recognize that even in the country today, we do not have a substantive law that can be able to deal with this. So there's a part of it that CBK needs to respond to, but even us as legislature, there's a part of it that we must deal with in terms of developing proper laws that can even protect customers who are consuming these virtual assets and cryptocurrencies. So I did recognize it in my moving notes. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's very useful information. Mr. Speaker, CBK, the reason why I wanted to know what the nominee said is to know his personal views, but more importantly, Mr. Speaker, is that we need to know CBK's position on cryptocurrency and virtual assets, Mr. Speaker. They cannot continue to bury their heads in the sand, Mr. Speaker. The country must be led into making a decision, and a proper decision on it, Mr. Speaker, because other countries, Mr. Speaker, Kenya is a lead innovator. We gave the world M-Pesa, Mr. Speaker. How comes you are being left behind when other countries innovate other things? If other countries, Mr. Speaker, had taken the kind of approach that we have taken on cryptocurrency on our own M-Pesa, Mr. Speaker, then we wouldn't be getting the global recognition that we are getting. The world is innovative in nature, Mr. Speaker, and we must appreciate and move with the tide and the times of the world, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I expect, Mr. Speaker, that in the next few months, Mr. Speaker, CBK shall be sending to Parliament a proposal. I am aware, Mr. Speaker, because there has been conversations around Parliament, that there was a member of National Assembly who was actually moving a bill on regulations of on cryptocurrency, Mr. Speaker. But you see, that is just a thought by a single member of Parliament. It is CBK that give the monetary policy of the country, Mr. Speaker, that guide all the nation, Mr. Speaker, into making certain critical decisions from where they sit, Mr. Speaker. And we expect from them, actually, Mr. Speaker, to lead the charge on that particular front, Mr. Speaker. In fact, many companies that come. I know, for example, that there are companies that are engaged in the trade of binary assets, Mr. Speaker. And the best they can get from both CBK and the capital, not capital markets, this other one, Mr. Speaker, the regulator actually of capital markets, Mr. Speaker, is a letter of no objection. That is not enough, Mr. Speaker. We need to guide these institutions or these companies, Mr. Speaker, and let them know that there are certain criteria that they need to meet, Mr. Speaker, because they are citizens who are losing money. Kenyans are very advanced in terms of appreciation of technology, Mr. Speaker. And there are many young people that are losing money because of institutions that are digital platforms, Mr. Speaker, that are operating unregulated in this country, Mr. Speaker, and people are paying actually and end up losing money on those particular fronts, which we expect CBK to lead the way into making those particular decisions. Being granted a letter of no objection alone, Mr. Speaker, that cannot be enough in itself and of itself, Mr. Speaker. I expect that in the next few months, Mr. Speaker, now that we have added them and have approved for them a new deputy governor, Mr. Speaker, that the CBK shall get busy and guide us as a nation into that particular space so that we lead on the continent. I know there are a number of African countries, Mr. Speaker, that have already led the way and done that particular. The last point, Mr. Speaker, that I expect of this nominee and CBK in general is on the issue of these predatory lending apps, Mr. Speaker, that many of my colleagues have spoken about, that they are increasing day by day, and you're not sure, Mr. Speaker, whether they have been licensed or unlicensed, and whether, Mr. Speaker, they are actually living up to the promise of what this administration promised the people of Kenya. At the heart of the campaigns, I know President William Ruto on the campaign trail promised actually, Mr. Speaker, to take millions of Kenyans out of CRB. And that has been done. There are many people that had been banned, Mr. Speaker, from ever borrowing because of listing in CRB. But we are not removing them from CRB, Mr. Speaker, so that they can be taken advantage of by these online lending applications, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, it is our expectation that CBK will continue evolving with the times, Mr. Speaker, and lead the country. We expect actually, Mr. Speaker, to see occasionally an update from them of institutions that do not live by the regulations of what their license demands are, Mr. Speaker, being banned and being stopped from doing business in Kenya, because many of these institutions, Mr. Speaker, do not even have residence here in the country, Mr. Speaker, and therefore they just come here, they reap from young people, you toil, Mr. Speaker, and you disappear out of the country after making a tidy sum. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I hope, it is my hope, Mr. Speaker, that CBK shall soon be leading the country in making a firm decision on what to do with many such institutions that are taking advantage of our young people. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to be long. I want to congratulate Mr. Gerald Nyaoma Rita on his nomination and propose approval, Mr. Speaker. I grant him my vote, satisfied by the work that was done by the committee and the report and the answers that he gave, knowing full well, Mr. Speaker, that he shall do a good job in reforming our financial institutions and making sure that we continue to be a global leader in this particular space. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Senator Okenyuri Esther.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to support the report by the Finance and Budget Committee on the approval of Gerald Nyaoma as Deputy Governor Central Bank. I've gone through the report. He has a rich in terms of his academic credentials. Mr. Speaker, with 36 years of experience and some of the major issues we are facing as a country, I believe then maybe if he was on the technical section, now he's in a decision-making position, he's going to largely assist the governor in making decisions that will help this country stabilize financially. If I can comment on what the majority leader, Senator Aaron Cheriot, was mentioning about repayment of, let's say, HELB loan. I want to admit that initially when I was actually jobless, it took me a very long time to repay that HELP loan. And I know as a result, so many other students who are looking up to such allocations were not able to benefit. But now I am fortunate that I actually completed that obligation, and I can walk free knowing I'm aiding several other needy Kenyans study and benefit from the HELP loan, Mr. Speaker. So I wish to also finally highlight on money laundering, Mr. Speaker. That is one of the major issues we have as a country, because if such, we have several inlets where such money is coming in and the Central Bank of Kenya is not able to monitor such, then we'll still be having the issues we are actually mentioning. One would wonder, why am I bothered about money laundering and your money is not being stolen? It ends up affecting people who are doing genuine business, Mr. Speaker. And that's why people are even opting to join cryptocurrency. Mr. Speaker, by the way, people who are trading in cryptocurrency are making more profit than leaving your money in the bank, for your information. So that's why several young Kenyans are actually trading in cryptocurrency, because if you leave your 10,000 in the bank, and here is cryptocurrency where if you invest 10,000 by the end of the month, you have more than 30,000 profit. Mr. Speaker, that's for a beginner. So such are some of the questions we need to think about when we want to go to the line of regulating. If Kenyans or young people are opting for cryptocurrency and leaving our existing banking systems, then we need to seriously think about where we went wrong and try to make the environment conducive to encourage most people get into the banking system so that we can generally thrive as a country. So I wish to support this report and wish Gerald all the best as he executes its mandate. I see Senator Cherargei trying to communicate to me. I'm not supporting him because he's from my region of origin. I support him because he's a qualified Kenyan and merit has been observed. We have seen from what the committee has highlighted, and this is what we need to see. It will encourage several other young people who have qualifications to put up themselves for some of these positions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Senator Geoff Godfrey Ososi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to also support this motion, the appointment of the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, I, from the onset, support this appointment. I have gone through the report, and one striking thing in this report is that for the first time, we are having a scenario where someone who has grown through the ranks within Central Bank is being recognized and rewarded. I think this is a culture that we need to promote in this country, so that when an opportunity arises in our public institutions, I think the first priority should be given to the persons who work in those organizations. It beats the logic that you have very qualified individuals who understand the institution better, who have worked there for many years, and then someone from outside who has no experience in a particular line of trade is brought to head or occupy a senior position in a public institution at the expense of the people who have worked there. So this is commendable, and I want to encourage the President to do the same for the other public institutions where he's the appointing authority, Mr. Speaker. This gentleman, Mr. Gerald Nyaoma Arita, is 36 years of experience in this sector. This is a very long period of time, Mr. Speaker, for one who has worked in this sector almost entirely his life. And I am confident that he's going to add value to Central Bank of Kenya, having served as a director in a number of very critical departments within the central bank, and that positions him to do better as a deputy governor of the central bank. Mr. Speaker, we know that this appointment is pursuant to Section 13B of the Central Bank of Kenya, which requires the president to appoint 2 deputy governors. So Mr. Rita is just one of the 2 deputy governors who are supposed to help the governor in managing the Central Bank of Kenya. So we expect that we are going to have a central bank that is going to deal with a number of very critical areas, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, one of the major roles of central bank is to regulate the monetary policy of this country. Mr. Speaker, monetary policy is very key to our economy. At this point where our citizens are complaining about high prices for essential commodities, I think CBK comes in handy, because one of the things they do is to ensure we have price stability as part of the monetary policy. And I think this is one area, Mr. Speaker, that a lot of focus has to be put, so that we ensure that our people are not able to, are not in a position where they are unable to purchase essential commodities like unga, sugar, paraffin, and those kind of things, cooking oil. We need a strong monetary policy, which is supported by a strong price stability strategy. And I think when he was being interviewed by the committee, he said that he will try to ensure that the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank is made efficient and effective. I hope that he's going to live to his words, because I think this is one area that Central Bank can really help this country to ensure we have economic growth in our country. Mr. Speaker, the next important thing is regulatory frameworks to deal with issues around combating fraudulent activities in our financial sector. Mr. Speaker, you have heard about money laundering. It's on the increase. In fact, Kenya is one of the hotspots, epicenters for money laundering. And Central Bank plays an important role in combating these criminal activities. And one of the things that we expect Central Bank to do is to strengthen the existing regulations so that we have strong rules and regulations to combat money laundering in our markets. Mr. Speaker, also issues of cybercrime. Cybercrime is a very serious issue in this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I read a report that said the banking sector in Kenya is losing up to 21 billion shillings every year as a result of cybercrime. And most of the banks do not report about this. Most of the banks keep quiet about this. But this is a very serious problem. And I hope the central bank, where Mr. Nyaoma is going to be the deputy governor, should do something about increasing levels of cybercrime targeting the financial sector. Because if you have a financial sector that is prone to cybercrime, then you will not be able even to implement what Majority Leader was talking about, the cryptocurrency. You will not be able to implement cryptocurrency. So if indeed this country wants to do the digital way in terms of money transaction, I think it will be important that we put focus in eradicating cybercrime targeting the financial sector so that people have confidence in doing business through cryptocurrency. Mr. Speaker, it is also important that the central bank leverages technology in its operation. Technology in its operation is very key. And I hope Mr. Nyaoma, who has wide experience in almost all the departments of central bank, will take that opportunity to push for full adoption of technology in central bank operations. Because, Mr. Speaker, as you know, technology plays a big role in reducing inefficiencies and promoting effectiveness in performance of the mandate of an institution. Mr. Speaker, central bank also is expected to oversight the financial institution. This has had challenges in the past. You remember, Mr. Speaker, a few years back, some of the banks were penalized for having participated in the NYS scandal, Mr. Speaker. The question was, where was central bank when all this was happening? So that means that the central bank needs to up its game to ensure that the financial institution, the banks, are properly oversighted and regulated based on the risk-based supervision. Mr. Speaker, the issue of financial inclusion, which has been addressed very effectively by M-Pesa platform, and Mr. Nyaoma, having been one of the key people who approved the usage of M-Pesa, should play a big role in ensuring that we have enhanced financial inclusivity in this country. We have so many people who are keeping money under their mattresses. Some are keeping their money under their chest or under their breast. This is money that should be put in the bank. They are doing this because we have gaps in our financial inclusion strategy. So we hope that Mr. Nyaoma will guide the central bank to ensure that we have an effective financial inclusion strategy to ensure as many Kenyans as possible join the banked population and not unbanked population. Mr. Speaker, the issue of high liquidity is a concern. That banks nowadays are holding a lot of money which they can't lend out. And you wonder why. Mr. Speaker, during President Kibaki's time, we used to see people moving around with the forms, asking us to apply for loans, but we no longer see those people do the same. I don't know what changed, Mr. Speaker, because we have a lot of liquidity in the bank, which ideally should be available to the citizen of this country so that they can invest in businesses for productive or multiplier effect in our economy. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Nyaoma, according to the report that we have, is in fact overqualified for this position. This is one person who ideally should be the central bank governor. But he has been there for many years. He has learned on job, and it was only wise that such a person be promoted to the position of deputy governor. So we wish him well and hope that he is going to use his knowledge, experience for the betterment of central bank and also to help in ensuring that central bank performs its role as a premier bank in this country, as a bank that is critical to our economy, and a bank that should work for the people of Kenya. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I support the appointment of Mr. Gerard Nyaoma Arita to be the central bank deputy governor. Mr. Speaker, I don't know why you are looking at me with wondering, but I just want to thank the members who came to my Thanksgiving in Vihiga. I think that was a show of love. Senator Cherigei and Senator Mutinda who are here, Senator Eddy, I want to thank you. And I think this is the spirit we want to have as a house, regardless of our political allegiances. That was a good demonstration, and I want to encourage us to continue with the same. And even those who went to the SG's function, Senator here, the real SG of UDA, wachana na ule mwingine, ule bandia, ule alienda, alikuwa anaitwa Malala.
I am reminding you of the standing orders of this House with regards to the language that you want to conclude your speech on.
Very well guided,
Please.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to create some satire because people are looking so tired here. Mr. Speaker, I want to say I support this bill, and I want to encourage the members to do the same. This motion, sorry. I encourage members to do the same.
Senator Osotsi, one of the reasons why the chair and Senator Veronica were looking at you was appreciating the kind of reception that you gave the honorable members who came to celebrate with you. You are aware yours truly ought to have been there, but for the treatment that you showed him in Kitale on a day before your event, he definitely could not have been able to attend because of the time constraints. But we celebrate you as the deputy party leader of ODM, and we celebrate the unity that you showed the political parties, and more importantly, bringing together the members of this House from both political divides. As the chair, as a member of the Speaker's panel, we celebrate your position as the deputy party leader, and we look forward to such other additional engagements. You'll invite us as a House to celebrate together. Senator Samson Cherargei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From the onset, I want to congratulate Senator Otsotsi and also thank Raila Amolo Odinga and the ODM fraternity for giving him opportunity to be the ODM deputy party leader. We received a warm reception in Vihiga. Mr. Speaker, Vihiga is in my neighborhood. Coincidentally, Senator Otsotsi is our in-law. The wife of Senator Otsotsi comes from Nandi County, and I had to be there. And you know, in our culture, when somebody of the status of Otsotsi is celebrating, the in-laws must be there. So, and I want to thank Mr. Speaker. It looks like going into the future, UDA and ODM will work closely with the reception that we received, Mr. Speaker. And we are happy that Raila Odinga and William Ruto are working closely for the betterment of this. Mr. Speaker, secondly, I want to support this report of finance and budget that has been tabled and moved by the Deputy Vice Chair, where Mr. Gerald Nyaoma Arita is going to be the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya. So, Speaker, I think a lot has been said. I want to congratulate the committee for doing speedily and efficiently the approval process of Mr. Gerald Nyaoma Arita. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, I want to say the only way we can create an ethical public service, a service of integrity, is to allow people to grow within rank and file of a public service, Mr. Speaker. This issue of making political appointments, especially in public service, must stop, Mr. Speaker. Let somebody grow from the level of clerk to middle-level manager to the level of running that organization, Mr. Speaker, because they understand the challenges that face such an organization, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy that Mr. Gerald Nyamoita, Mr. Speaker, Arita, grew up within the rank and file of the financial sector and financial public service of this country. The only way we can inspire and encourage the public service to be vibrant is to allow people to grow within the rank and file of public service with ethics, being corruption-free, Mr. Speaker, and understand. So I want to commend Mr. Speaker and thank the President for appointing him, Mr. Speaker, because I know many of the public servants in this country, as we talk today, will be happy and excited, Mr. Speaker, that you can grow in a public service sector until you had that, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, we should discourage political appointments in some of these sagas, Mr. Speaker, some of these parastatals. Let us allow public servants to grow within rank and file and add those institutions, Mr. Speaker, so that we don't get people from nowhere to add some of these critical institutions. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank also Central Bank of Kenya, because their work is to do monetary policy, is to do financial surveillance among commercial institutions, is to do regulation within the financial sector, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I want to ask Kenyans, the way the inflation has been stabilized, the way the economy is looking better than when President William Ruto took in 2022, Mr. Speaker. When the President took as the President of the Republic of Kenya in September 2022, Mr. Speaker, when he was sworn in as the fifth President of the Republic of Kenya, Kenya was almost defaulting in payment of public debt, which is close to 10.5 trillion Kenyan shillings, Mr. Speaker. And you know, every child that is born in this country owes the public debt 201,000 shillings per child that is born, Mr. Speaker. The President has done well that there is no default or payment of public debt by his government, Mr. Speaker. And I want to ask Kenyans to be patient, that in the next 1 or 2 years, in the next 1 year, Mr. Speaker, this country will be flowing with honey and milk. This country will be Canaan, Mr. Speaker, by His Excellency the President William Ruto. And I know to many people it appears to me to be a miracle, but it will be a miracle that happens after 2,000 years that Jesus left this world, Mr. Speaker. Let us give the President the chance and opportunity to transform the economy of this country, Mr. Speaker. And one of the important critical factors in this is the Central Bank of Kenya. If they can do proper financial regulatory, Mr. Speaker, it will be very critical. So I want to appeal to Kenyans, as they take to social media, they have a right, Mr. Speaker, you are a senior lawyer in this country. Freedom of expression has its boundaries, Mr. Speaker. We want to ask Kenyans who use social media, they have a right to criticize government, but they should do it factually. They should do it in a proper and hygienic way, Mr. Speaker. Freedom of expression does not mean to insult or you demean. You can still pass your message without demeaning, without undermining, without insulting, Mr. Speaker. So as Kenyans go to social media to criticize, Mr. Speaker, they have the right to, but they should criticize it in a factual manner. Even as they criticize in the negative things, they should also be saying the positive things that this government of His Excellency President William Ruto has done. So in the next 1 year, Mr. Speaker, I want to assure the nation, and we saw when the President State of the Nation, Mr. Speaker, the Kenyan economy is looking more resilient than it was before. The Kenyan economy is looking better after William Ruto took over. We are talking about inflation rate of 2%, Mr. Speaker. As we talk, even when you walk around, Mr. Speaker, you can feel money. Where I come from, Mr. Speaker, we are selling maize at the moment, Mr. Speaker. You have bonuses in South Rift and across the country, Mr. Speaker. Let us allow the President to transform this country to a better nation. And let me ask Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, in terms of this inflation rate, and the cost of living has significantly gone down because we depend on central bank to do stable regulatory financial and financial environment, Mr. Speaker. Even the cost of living has gone down, the cost of food has gone down, Mr. Speaker. Many other issues are coming that look good for this country, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I want to appeal and also, Mr. Speaker, advise the new Deputy Governor, Mr. Gerald Arita Nyaoma, that let him be Deputy Governor. He is not a co-governor. You know the problem we're having in this country, Mr. Speaker? I see many counties have a problem because a Deputy Governor imagines that they are co-governors. If Mr. Nyaoma will just be a Deputy Governor, he should just be assistant to the governor. Let him not be a co-governor. I think that's a free advice because we have seen situations, Mr. Speaker, where people are trying to be the co-governor or even a co-president, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, secondly, is on the issue of monetary policy. Monetary policy is critical. We want to see the issue of money laundering being taken care of, Mr. Speaker. We are aware, Mr. Speaker, that quite a number of people are using money laundering through financial systems of this country. We want to call the central bank, now that we have a new deputy governor, Mr. Speaker, to put in place necessary mechanism to prevent money laundering. We don't want to see money that comes from cartels and drugs and corruption and proceeds of corruption being laundered through our banking system in this country. We don't want to see the money that comes from pirates, Mr. Speaker, getting into our financial marketing banking system in this country, Mr. Speaker. I know to run a commercial bank, Mr. Speaker, you need a deposit of 1 billion to run a commercial bank, Mr. Speaker. I want to request central bank to raise that, to run a commercial bank in this country should be 10 billion. Mr. Speaker, because I'm told the number of people who earn more will increase going into the future because of President William Ruto's macroeconomic policies in this country. So I want to request, let us stop. The commercial banks should now increase, Mr. Speaker, to 10 billion to operate a commercial account, Mr. Speaker. Number two, Mr. Speaker, because you see a bank like Kenya Commercial Bank, KCB, is 1.4 trillion Kenyan shillings, Mr. Speaker. It's one of the richest banks, KCB. So if you ask KCB to open a commercial bank account, deposit is 1 billion, is chicken change, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we need also the issue of technology. You know, Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, even fixed deposit interest rates are not looking very good. That is why Kenyans prefer to keep their money through cryptocurrency. And I'm told Bitcoin is coming back, Mr. Speaker. The central bank must work to ensure that the fixed interests are paid to Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. Because that is why Kenyans are giving their money in pillows and in their mattresses, Mr. Speaker. Because Mr. Speaker, the financial surveillance by central bank must be up to date. You have seen in the previous years, Mr. Speaker, some of the banks, I think like Imperial Bank and others, have collapsed with Kenyans' money. What is central bank doing to recover Kenyans who have lost their money because the bank has gone under? And that is why Kenyans do not trust the banking system until they keep money in their pillows, in their skin, Mr. Speaker, in their mattresses, Mr. Speaker, in their quads, Mr. Speaker, even in the forest. Others are digging graves to keep their money, Mr. Speaker, because they don't trust banking system. Because in this country, when a banking system is collapsing, you don't get your money back, Mr. Speaker. We need to have a proper deposit protection fund that is ensured to cushion clients in this country, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, on the issue of domestic debt and foreign exchange reserves, we want our central bank to ensure it is stable so that even when, balance of trade, where we import oil, we import food, if we don't have sufficient foreign reserves, Mr. Speaker, it will always affect the stability of the shilling. And I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, let us be honest. There is a time dollar against the shilling had risen up to 160 shillings. As we talk, it is now below 130 shillings against $1, Mr. Speaker, which means the economy has improved, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of licensing and regulatory and price stability of basic commodities, I want to ask, Mr. Speaker, let them maintain, even, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, there is this issue of microcredit lending institutions. They must be cracked. We don't look like what to credit, Mr. Speaker. When somebody finishes, especially for these young guys in border, when they're almost finishing paying for their border disappears. And they are paid this, Mr. Speaker. We must arrest the rogue microcredit, like what to credit, like Platinum, Mr. Speaker. They are flinching and fleecing. They are taking like coupe, what do you call the ticks? They are flinching and fleecing young people who are struggling, Mr. Speaker, in the border sector. The new deputy governor must ensure financial surveillance, as I conclude, is on top notch, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with those very many remarks, and Mr. Speaker, you need to protect me, he's saying something in Kikuyu. You know, this gentleman nowadays is bald-headed. I don't know, he's a member of Murima Defense Force or something. Mr. Speaker, I want to support this motion and allow members, let us give Nyamoita Arita. I think this is one of the nominees that we have never had a problem because he has grown up in rank and file in public service. Members, going into the future, let us allow people to rise up through ranks and file of public service so that we can give confidence to the public service, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with those funny remarks and your indulgence, I want to say it was good to see you in Kitale. I'm told you didn't leave that place as it was expected. I'm told you were treated like a king. I hope you left your markings around Kitale and Trans Nzoia, Mr. Speaker, so that, but otherwise, let us always support our colleagues when we can. Mr. Speaker, with those very remarks, I support this motion.
Thank you, Senator Samson Cherargei. I will give Senator Ali Roba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the nomination of Mr. Gerald Nyaoma Arita. Mr. Speaker, when this gentleman appeared before the joint committee of both houses, he really presented himself as well versed with the matters banking and particularly central bank. Having worked in the central bank for over 36 years and acted in different positions within the departments within the bank, meaning he was a very all-rounded staff of the central bank before he retired. Mr. Speaker, that was extremely critical in order to complement the governor and the deputy governor that have taken over. It's important to get somebody with very serious institutional memory of central bank to be able to complement their efforts in making sure that our central bank does what it's supposed to do as effectively as possible. Mr. Speaker, now that somebody with such experience has joined, it is our expectation, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the public of Kenya, that Mr. Arita and the team, including the governor and the deputy governor who preceded Mr. Arita, the three of them together need to make sure as expeditiously as possible they put policies in place to be able to make sure Kenya is not left behind in this space of cryptocurrency or the issues of virtual transactions that are taking shape across the globe and that is really impacting positively in the global trade. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is important that this is properly regulated and properly looked into, as well as the issues of microfinance institutions so that they do not take advantage of our innocent masses. And also move with speed to make sure that the banks are properly regulated, monitored, and made sure that the customers get what they deserve without being exploited, such as when central bank reduces the base lending rate, when central bank increases, the commercial banks move very fast at the speed of lightning to increase the interest rate for its existing customers. Likewise, it's important that when the base lending rate is reduced, then the commercial banks also follow suit by immediately at the same speed reducing the lending rates that they extend to their customers. Mr. Speaker, sir, as we looked through the career and some of the critical achievements Mr. Arita has done, it came to light through our engagement with Mr. Arita that he was one of the pioneer managers within the bank that facilitated the realization of M-Pesa in the country. Something that if he did not have the foresight required, he would have very easily turned away when it was assigned to him. But he really facilitated, and we became a pioneer in that field of technological advancement in not only in our country but across the globe, which a lot of reference has been made into the issue of mobile banking, and mobile banking from the perspective of we've taken it to levels that were unprecedented, and previously no any other country globally has managed to exploit using technology in this concept of M-Pesa, using our mobiles to be able to transact effectively at the same level or even better than using credit card, with security that is required inbuilt in it to be able to now get a situation where most countries have started copying this issue in order to, looking at that lead that our country and Safaricom as an entity has taken, which we congratulate Safaricom and also Mr. Arita for having facilitated this program of realization of M-Pesa in our country and became a world leader globally in terms of taking advantage of innovation and technology in the mobile sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I rise to support, the country is undergoing a lot of transformation, Mr. Speaker, and a joint effort by the government has become extremely apparent in terms of where also the bank, the central bank, plays a role in terms of us improving our credit standing with international lenders. When the current government came into being, we were near blacklisting with respect to accessing credit from other institutions. And Mr. Speaker, while there is air of excitement about credit and liability and debt ceilings in Kenya, it's important to note that countries even so advanced as America and others operate very seriously with borrowing and debt. It's not an issue very unique to Kenya. And since we adopted the debt to GDP ratio as a measure, and we put our ideal recommended level at 55% of the GDP, now the trend has started taking shape where we are gradually moving towards that 55%, which also is commendable, of the government as well as also the National Treasury. Mr. Speaker, we have also improved tremendously. Records indicate, and very soon we'll be tabling the issue of medium-term debt management strategy, where it's going to indicate very clearly that we have improved in our repayment of the debt. From 2022 to date, the numbers have more than doubled in terms of our repayment ratio. As opposed to that, it stands at almost at 1.5 trillion in the current financial year, which is something that shares a very critical indication that we're headed in the right direction. Mr. Speaker, sir, something else that ought to be discussed. Most people, when the exchange rate came down, most people thought that is a glitch. It was just an accident that the exchange rate has come down from 164 shillings to the dollar to up to 130. And most people, the skeptics, have kept on saying that, Mr. Speaker, this is going to be short-lived. But it's amazing that it has sustained itself and the exchange rate has stabilized at 130, and we're hoping even better. And that also is a matter of monetary policy from the bank and also the government in terms of availability of. And Mr. Speaker, when the President gave the State of the Nation, there's also the discussion. We had zero, reserve in terms of foreign exchange reserve to cover even for a month. And now it's reported we have up to 4 months of export facilitation in terms of foreign currency reserves, which is very commendable. Mr. Speaker, I beg to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Ali Roba. Honorable members, there seems to be no other member interested in contributing to this motion, and I now call upon the mover to reply. Senator Tabitha.
Mr. Speaker, I really want to take this opportunity to appreciate all the senators, starting with Senator Eddy, who seconded this particular motion, Senator Ledama, Senator Faki. Thank you so much. Majority Leader, Senator Aaron, Sokenyuri, Senator Cherelgai, my chair, Senator Ali Roba, for their great input. And at this particular point, I beg to reply that we adopt the report approval hearing for one Mr. Gerald Nyaoma Arita for the position of the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, honorable members, pass one to Standing Order 84-1. I make a determination that this particular motion does not affect counties. And Mr. Clerk, could we confirm that we do have quorum for purposes of putting the question? Sergeant at Arms, could you please ring the quorum bell for only 2 minutes? Clerk, could you confirm that we now have quorum? Okay. Sergeant at Arms, just the quorum bell, just stop the quorum bell. Now, honorable senators, I confirm that we do have quorum for purposes of putting the question, and I now put the question that the Senate adopts the report of the joint sittings of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget of the Senate and the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning of the National Assembly on the nomination of Mr. Gerald Nyaoma Arita for appointment to the position of Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, laid on the table of the Senate on Thursday, 28th of November, 2024, and pursuant to Section 13B, subsection 1 of the Central Bank of Kenya Act and Section 8 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act, approves the appointment of Mr. Gerald Nyaoma Arita for appointment to the position of the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya. Honorable Senators, will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honorable members, once again, before the next order, I have got a communication to make. This is a message from the National Assembly, passed by the National Assembly of the Coffee Bill, Senate Bills number 10 of 2023. Honorable Senators, I wish to report to the Senate that pursuant to Standing Order 46-3, Honorable Senator, you may take your seat. I wish to report to the Senate that pursuant to Standing Order 46-3, I received the following message from the Speaker of the National Assembly regarding the passage by the National Assembly of the Coffee Bill, Senate Bills number 10 of 2023. The message, dated Friday, 29th of November, 2024, was received in the office of the Clerk of the Senate on Tuesday, 3rd of December, 2024. Pursuant to Standing Order 46-4, I now report the message. Pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 41-1 and 144 of the National Assembly Standing Orders, I hereby convey the following message from the National Assembly. Whereas the coffee bill, Senate Bills number 10 of 2023, which was published as a bill concerning county governments to provide for, inter alia, the regulation of the coffee industry in the country, was passed by the Senate on Thursday, 21st of March 2024, and thereafter referred to the National Assembly for consideration pursuant to the provisions of Article 110, Sub-Article 4 of the Constitution. And whereas the National Assembly considered the said bill and passed it with amendments on Wednesday, 27th November 2024, in the form attached herewith. Now, therefore, in accordance with the provisions of Article 112, Sub-Article 1B of the Constitution, and Standing Order 41.1 and 144 of the National Assembly Standing Orders, I hereby convey the said decision of the National Assembly to the Senate. Honorable Senators, Article 112, Sub-Article 1B of the Constitution provides that if one house passes an ordinary bill concerning counties and the second house passes the bill in an amended form, it shall be referred back to the originating house for reconsideration. Honorable Senators, in this regard, I direct the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Livestock, and Fisheries to deliberate on the National Assembly amendments and report to the Senate. Further, pursuant to Standing Order 165.1 of the Senate Standing Orders, I direct that the National Assembly amendments to the coffee bill, Senate Bills number 10 of 2023, be circulated to all senators. At an appointed time, the Senate Business Committee will schedule the consideration of the amendments. The House is accordingly guided. I thank you. Clerk, let's call the next order.
Order number 18, the County Assembly's Pensions Scheme Bill, Senate Bills number 14 of 2024, second reading, resumption of debate.
Honorable members, we, for purposes of record, have rearranged the order paper so that we directly go to order number 18 for the convenience of the House. Honorable Senators, order number 18 is the County Assembly Services Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 34 of, County Assembly's Pension Scheme, County Assembly's Pension Scheme, Senate Bills number 14 of 2024. This is a resumption of the debate, and I've seen honorable members have requested to speak to it, and I will start with Senator Retiree.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I want to thank the Senate, Mr. Speaker, under Article 96, the role and function of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, is to protect devolution. One of the way of protecting devolution, Mr. Speaker, is to enrich devolution by creating legislative interventions, Mr. Speaker, that will ensure that we continue to nurture and nourish devolution, Mr. Speaker, in this country. Mr. Speaker, this County Assembly's pension scheme is a clear milestone, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you remember when we took over, the County Governments Act has been used in bringing devolution to form, Mr. Speaker, protecting it, but there are still many laws, Mr. Speaker, that are still not in place, Mr. Speaker. Even like impeachment procedure bill, which we tried to consider in the last session. We had the issue of financial autonomy by the county assemblies, which we just concluded and voted for, where we are giving financial autonomy to county assemblies so that they can do their work independently, have parliamentary service commission the way we have as a Senate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is milestone from the majority leader, where he's sponsoring this bill to enrich the functionality of county assemblies. Mr. Speaker, we don't want our MCAs to continue being public relations officers of governors. We want, when we come to Narok, the MCS of Narok do oversight without fear or favor, where they depend on CCM or finance to allocate them their resources to function, Mr. Speaker. We want MCS, when they have served, just like members of parliament, have opportunity of getting pensions, Mr. Speaker, because they are state officers. Mr. Speaker, we need to correct this historical injustice against MCS, Mr. Speaker. Because in the previous municipalities, we used to have councillors, Mr. Speaker. Councillors did not have pension scheme, Mr. Speaker. As we talk today, in the last session, we didn't bring a motion to request for an honorarium or one payoff to councillors because they don't have pension scheme, Mr. Speaker. For example, more than 12,000 councillors in this country, across the nation, even from Nandi County, led by the chairman Maritime, Mr. Speaker, most of them are yet to get the resolution that we did pass. I remember in the last session, we passed the motion. It went to the National Assembly. I want to appeal the Ministry of National Treasury that they should pay all councillors their money, Mr. Speaker, because that's the little we can give them. You have to appreciate, Mr. Speaker, municipalities and county councils are the bedrock and foundation of the current devolution. It was at that level that we had municipalities and county councils that now most of the counties where we had Kipsigis County Council, where they used to have Bomet and Kericho, we had Nandi Hills County Council, Nandi County Council, Warren County Council, even Nairobi here, municipal and municipalities that we used to have, even in Lamu, Mr. Speaker, where my brother, Senator Kituko, comes from. Those were, the councillors were the baseline of where devolution we are enjoying in, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, to correct the historical injustice towards leaders of Mashinani, the MCS, is to ensure we pass this law to allow them to have pension scheme the way when you serve 2 terms and more, you can access your pension, Mr. Speaker. Just like any other civil servant, Mr. Speaker. Any civil servant access pension scheme. So it's a basic right. It is not even supposed to be a privilege that anybody who has served, Mr. Speaker, and you know, serving as a politician is not in this country, is one of the hazardous engagements that you'll ever engage, Mr. Speaker. It has a lot of occupational hazards. I would use that word, Mr. Speaker, where you work for the people 24/7, where the phone calls come from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. in the evening, from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., Mr. Speaker, where you must handle each and every, by the way, being a politician in this country and a leader is a very unique experience because you are exposed to everything. Even if you are a doctor, you must know. I was in Kapsabet County Referral Hospital, Mr. Speaker, which is in a pathetic condition, and I hope the name I should close that hospital because what I witnessed after I left Vihiga, I drove immediately to Kapsabet County Referral Hospital. Mr. Speaker, that place smells like death. The filth and the dirt where Governor Sang has run down completely that hospital. Even you cannot qualify to treat an animal or even a sick dog, Mr. Speaker. That place, I was able to notice, even when you are inside the ward, you can smell death, dirt, filth, Mr. Speaker. You go to the toilets that are wards, Mr. Speaker. I was shocked. I have never been traumatized in this life. Even when I used to be arrested by Subarus, this was the first time I came face to face with the incompetency of Governor Sang in terms of running down that county referral hospital, Mr. Speaker. There is no lighting. Basic light is not there in the wards, Mr. Speaker. There is no drugs. I was shocked, Mr. Speaker, and I want to encourage MCS to do proper oversight. They need to do oversight, Mr. Speaker, the MCS. Can you believe, in confidence, some of the medical practitioners told me that they have to buy gloves, Mr. Speaker. When they are treating patients at Kapsabet County Referral Hospital, when your patient walks in, before the doctor, he will tell you, go and buy gloves in the pharmacies in Kapsabet Town, buy syringes, and buy masks, Mr. Speaker. After the doctor has seen you, they tell you to go and buy drugs again from the pharmacy, Mr. Speaker. Where we saw a week ago, the governor was launching only 48 million worth of drugs. But most of those drugs, Mr. Speaker, are fluids, Mr. Speaker. And reproductive health drugs, Mr. Speaker, such as, I know the issue of HIV/AIDS and prevention, Mr. Speaker, was launching other things, Mr. Speaker, which I cannot say because this program is parent guided, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, it's a PG program that every Kenyan is watching, and I don't want our parliamentary broadcast unit to be sanctioned by the Ministry of ICT. So, Mr. Speaker, there is a problem. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, the MCS of Bomet, the MCS of Kericho, the MCS of Embu, the MCS of Narok, Lamu, and the rest of counties, including Nairobi, where Nairobi delegation is talking to you. We cannot be working hard to pass laws to give them powers, and then they are not doing oversight, Mr. Speaker. Correct. We cannot. Correct. We have given them financial autonomy. We are now giving them pension. We are giving them everything. As the Bible says, when we met MCS, and I know Majority Leader knows because we go for legislative forum, for County Assembly's legislative forum, where we are in Kisumu. One of the requests of the MCS was pension scheme, and also the issue, Mr. Speaker, of financial autonomy. The Bible says, if a child asks you for bread, you don't give them the stone. As a Senate, the MCS asked for us, and we have delivered. The minimum requirement we want from the MCS is proper oversight. You saw, Mr. Speaker, what happened in my county assembly, where an ad hoc report was being tabled, where the Governor Sang administration cannot account for 10 billion Kenya shillings worth of the projects. You saw the county assembly went into synodai. Mr. Speaker, it is very unfortunate. I want to ask you, and I want to thank the 19 MCS led by Kapsabet Ward MCA who did ad hoc report, Mr. Speaker. You see in the paper in Kapsabet, the project is complete, but kwa ground vitu ni different, Mr. Speaker. You go to Kakiptui dispensary, somewhere in Masab sub-county, Mr. Speaker. A Kakiptui dispensary, colleagues, was constructed with 450,000 Kenya shillings. The governor administration or maladministration went and renovated the same dispensary with over 3 million Kenya shillings. Even in Kakiptui, Mr. Speaker, the borehole that 3 million was used is only giving kutu water. The water, how do you say water in kutu? Borehole, dirty water, Mr. Speaker. Yet over 3 million was sunk. I was in Kapsabet Newborn and Mother Unit, even the one in Kabiet, Mr. Speaker, where it has consumed over 1 billion Kenyan shillings, Mr. Speaker. If the MCAs can assist us in doing proper oversight in Mashinani, I can tell you the evolution will flourish. You don't have to wait for Senator Sigei to go and visit. I saw you, and I hope you had one protective gear. I saw you in some swamp, and you were trying to show us whether a hole has been sunk for water in that region, Mr. Speaker. You don't need Senator Sigei to go up to that level. Where is the area MCA? It is the primary oversight, Mr. Speaker. Correct. That is what they need to do. Even when I see an MCA in Kapsoit Ward, in Kericho County, trying to talk about the role of senator, yet he cannot oversight project in Kapsoit Ward, Mr. Speaker. He cannot tell us what happened to Mananasi factory that was supposed to be constructed, Mr. Speaker. It is very unfortunate that MCAs will fight for you, but you don't want to support us in doing proper oversight, Mr. Speaker. I want to challenge, Mr. Speaker. I want to challenge. I even expect a statement from Narok County Assembly MCAs. Yeah. I saw the governor had the biggest convoy that even President Ruto does not have. And that vehicles that were being driven was to go and launch something that is not even worth more than 5 million, Mr. Speaker. Flying choppers. I wish Senator Ledamo was listening to this. I don't know whether the budget of Narok can sustain use of chopper by the governor. It can't. Mr. Speaker, a governor is flying with a chopper all over. You know, it doesn't make sense in this country. And that is why Kenyans sometimes no longer have confidence, Mr. Speaker, in our people. I saw a governor saying when he was being elected, he was a poor man. 2027, he will be laying the money on the ground. And the majority leader was smiling, and he was slapping. I don't know whether he could be the beneficiary or not. Mr. Speaker, we should not allow counties to look like it is an enrichment centers, where somebody is elected a governor, The only motivation is to steal and plunder county resources. So when we see Governor of Narok flying around in choppers, I wonder if the people, that fuel and the hiring of those choppers, if it can be put to Narok people, they'll get ECD, they'll get clean waters. I think the reason your Governor Ledama flies, Governor Tutu flies around in a chopper, is because he has not made roads. There are no roads. The only way he'll fly around is by a chopper, Mr. Speaker. And I normally see even the senator driving at night, not because he wants to function at night, but because the roads are impassable and he gets stuck all the time, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the MCS must do proper oversight. That is my request. We are doing the pension scheme. We have given the financial autonomy. And I want to warn MCS, Mr. Speaker, because I have been their champion. There is an unholy alliance that the governors and MCS are doing nowadays. I don't know whether Bomet is that disease is there. It is in Nandi. It is in Lamu. What the MCS are doing with governors nowadays, Mr. Speaker, is to go into an unholy alliance. They sleep in one bed. Can you imagine some MCS are contractors? They are given contracts by the same governor. Mr. Speaker, it will always affect what we call conflict of interest in the oversight. Because I have a number of MCS who are transporters within the county government. Like, for example, we have a tea estate called, the name is losing. You find that a transporter, even in Kaimo's tea factory, the transporter is an MCA, Mr. Speaker. They are doing business with county. In fact, when the Haddock report came, the MCAs who objected the report, most of them were being mentioned or being contractors, Mr. Speaker. I even associate myself with the incoming chairman of AU, Raila Odinga, when he says it is very unfortunate that when a president or anybody goes to launch the project, the contractor is a member of parliament. It will blind our oversight role. And I want to ask members of National Assembly, as they are busy bashing the Senate, they should not be the contractors in some of these projects, Mr. Speaker, that we see. So I don't know whether Bomet has such a challenge where you find an MCA is a contractor. So how will they oversight the governor? How will you oversight? Mr. Speaker, I want to appeal to the MCAs. If you want to be a leader, be a leader. If you want to be a contractor, be a contractor. If you want to be a public relations officer of a governor, resign from being an MCA, go and be a PRO at the department of the county. Because, Mr. Speaker, I feel sad when I walk to a function in Nandi and get an MCA speaking more of projects and praising the governor and doing a PR stance that even the governor is not even aware. And it is across 46 counties, Mr. Speaker. So I want to call that you can work concurrently with members of county assembly, Mr. Speaker. But at the same time, you can do it without conflict of interest. Mr. Speaker, finally, on this issue of pension scheme, as I've said, I want to thank the majority leader for bringing this bill. I think all MCS, Mr. Speaker, there is a small matter. There is a small matter of the issue of their personal emoluments, salaries, and stipends, and also mileage allowances. I want to appeal to the new, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the President profusely for appointing one of my voters from Kapkures in Terik Ward to be the chairperson of SRC, Mr. Speaker. And I want to ask members of National Assembly to speedily approve the new SRC team. My message to the new SRC team, they need to relook at the salaries, emoluments, mileage allowances, and welfare of members of county assemblies across the country. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, after we have given them financial autonomy, after we have given them pension, after we have fought them to have better salary, mileage, emoluments, and welfare, our MCAs will do their job. It will be the mockery of this House if we have worked hard through the majority leader to have financial autonomy for MCAs, to have pension scheme for the MCAs, Mr. Speaker, to have improvement of their salary, welfare, and emoluments, then they cannot do proper oversight, Mr. Speaker. And I'm speaking to all MCAs from Nandi, from Bomet, from Kericho, from Narok, from Lamu, from Membu, from Kirinyaga, from Siaya, from Oma Bay, from all over, from Turkana. where, Mr. Speaker, where a Form 4 graduate is giving out drugs in Turkana. And the County Assembly, Health Committee of Turkana County Assembly cannot go and visit, Mr. Speaker. I am appealing. We cannot be working hard and then you let us down, Mr. Speaker. And I hope in the next legislative forum of county assemblies, we must call out as it is, Mr. Speaker, so that we can be able to ensure that we put in place, Mr. Speaker. Even the SRC should work towards it. Mr. Speaker, I want to appeal to members, let us support this bill. We will ensure our county assemblies become more stronger, more vibrant, more independent to ensure that we do oversight going into the future, Mr. Speaker, and having the ability, and even, Mr. Speaker, so that all these issues, even construction of county assembly headquarters, should be completed and ensure that we functional, Mr. Speaker, and have that ability. Mr. Speaker, with those very many remarks, I wish to support this county assembly's pension scheme bill 2024. I hope when we pass, I want to appeal to our sister, the junior house, National Assembly, to fast track this bill. I don't think there is a lot of issues with this bill. This is just a direct bill. So, Speaker, with those many remarks, I support.
Thank you, Senator Cherargei. The particular project you made reference to in Bomet County, Senator Cherargei, is called Lulusik, where the governor indeed, on national TV and radio, told the people that he had completed the project, when, as a matter of fact, this is in Mutorakwa Ward, Bomet Central constituency. Over 4 million Kenya shillings went to waste. Honorable members, I now invite Senator Olekina to make his contributions to this particular bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on a lighter note, I was trying to follow the contribution of my colleague, Senator Cherargei, and I was a bit confused because I didn't know whether this bill was a bill that will now give MCS and county assemblies money, because he said you should not be waiting for CCs to give you money. But then he continued and then addressed other very, very important issues. But it's always interesting when you sit down here and you listen to Cherargei, even if you're dozing, you can't doze, because he'll say something very drastic that will just get you up. Now, Mr. Speaker, this issue of pension is something which is very, very pertinent. And it's something that we in this parliament must really consider putting some form of discipline into the issue of pension schemes. I know my good friend, the majority leader, means well by looking at a way of establishing a pension scheme that will take care of the interests of all county assemblies and their staffs. But I'm afraid, Mr. Speaker, that my good friend is just opening up a can of worms. In the last parliament where I sat with him, we were trying to collapse the two big LAP fund and LAP set into LAP trust and LAP fund into one scheme. And the amount of lobbying and fights that we got, we didn't actually get anywhere. Earlier, there was a statement which was brought by Senator Faki, which was raising serious questions in terms of the management of pensions. I think what we need to do, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to beseech the majority leader, as we debate this bill, we also have to put some form of discipline.
Order, Senator Kamau.
Put some form
Senator
of discipline
Kamau.
in this issue of pension schemes. How do you work? I see that the majority leader said that the retirement age should be not less than 50. In other jurisdictions, people don't even talk about retirement, because the older you get, the wiser you become. But I think in this country that we live in, because of the demand for jobs, you know, people are encouraged to take early retirement. You know, people are encouraged to be able to retire and go home and do something else to give room to the younger generation to take on positions. But I think what is important is for us to be able to find a way where we do not over-legislate, That has always been one of my biggest pet peeves. Sometimes I feel like we over-legislate, we create jobs for people, but when you see the indiscipline in the management of these pension funds, where someone spends, sell their cows, including mortgaging their houses, to be able to come to Treasury here and follow their pension. Every so often you find people who walk around. There's a gentleman, a guy called Karanja, Peter Karanja. Peter Karanja one day met me at a KCB bank and told me that he needed to speak to Mr. Kili because of his pension. And every single day, Mr. Karanja calls me. I connected them with Kili, but he's still complaining that his money has not been paid. This is a man who is over 80 years old. And he's got his calculation properly. I think, Majority Leader, what I wanted you to include in this bill is to clearly put a mechanism whereby when an MCA, I don't know whether this covers MCAs, but a staff of the county assembly retires today, which is December 3rd. By January 3rd, when he's supposed to be getting a salary, he can be able to draw down on his pension. But right now, you can't really say we have anything like that, because all these pension schemes, and we are going to fight them now. I can guarantee you, Mr. Speaker, we are going to pursue them. We are going to demand audits on how they spend their money. Because most of them are now busy building, apartment complexes. They are busy buying assets all over, including even looking at how much county government owes them in penalties and interest, so that they can be able to go and negotiate on what they are now calling asset swaps. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to beseech my dear colleague, the Majority Leader, to be able to bar any sort of interest when it comes to, remunerations, when it comes to deductions not having been forwarded. And because this is a cycle, I don't believe that county governors intentionally decide not to remit the deductions. The truth of the matter is, because sometimes money is delayed from the exchequer to the accounts, this is a HR process where this is your gross salary, these are your deductions, so it is done. And most of the time, money delays reaching people's salaries. Sometimes even we ourselves in this parliament delay in getting our salaries. Sometimes our staffs don't even get their salary until 2 weeks. That's a reality. Sometimes KRA charges us penalties for us not having paid to KRA the deductions. But the truth of the matter, the exchequer has delayed. So I would like to request that in the event that there is proof that there is a delay from the exchequer, county assemblies should not be punished. They should not be charged any interest or penalties. So I'd like to request that you relook at your penalty clause. Look at the interest clause. Either eliminate, so that we can do God's work properly. We can be able to ensure that people retire honorably. We can also be able to ensure that our county governments, our county assemblies, are not pushed to making deals now, to swapping their assets, so that they can be able to clear these interest and penalties. So as we sit in this parliament today and deliberate on this county assemblies pension scheme, it is also important for us, we are not in this bill per se, to also consider other distinguished men and women who have served this country. We've got people like the Auditor General, for instance. The Auditor General there was a day I met with the former Auditor General, Ouko. And Ouko said, I've served this country for many years. I've gone into retirement. And guess what? I don't even have a pension. I'm sure the Attorney General will probably say something the same or something different. There is a bill that in the last parliament I introduced here. But when I introduced that bill, I was forced to actually withdraw the bill. It was the retirement scheme of the former vice presidents, former prime minister, and other designated officers. That issue was set aside. So if we are being honest, that we want to make sure that for the time God has given us on earth, when we serve as public officers, when we serve, when we continue enjoying our remunerations, when we retire, I shouldn't have to sell my cows to be able to pursue for me to be paid my pension. So I think, Majority Leader, I would request that you really look into that, consider it. There's one other thing that I think makes it very difficult for pension schemes to be managed effectively. This has got to do with the establishment of the board. I can see in this bill, and I perused through it, it says that at least for them to be able to call a meeting, 6 board members must be able to, sign so that the chair can be able to call a meeting. The relationship between the CEO and the chair must be clearly defined. Who is more powerful? Is it the chairman of the pension scheme? Is it the CEO? So that it is easier. You guys are there to do God's work. You are there to make sure that young Kenyans who serve diligently, they gave their sweat and blood. When they retire, they can be able to continue being honorable. In fact, I think it might even be a recipe for ending corruption in this country. Because you'll find, which is very, very sad, Mr. Speaker, you'll find that Kenyans who work, they're diligent. They go to work every day, 8 to 5. Are teachers, staffers at the assembly. The day they retire like this, they celebrate, there's a party. But trust you me, that will be the last day they'll be able to enjoy any money coming to them. Having served for a long time. So, Mr. Speaker, I really would like to beseech that my good friend focuses on how the retirees will be able to access their funds. As a matter of fact, if today you ask me whether there's a set amount for civil servants who have worked and their money has been deducted from their salaries and it has been forwarded to one of these pension schemes, like Lab Trust or Lab Fund, that set amount of money, how is that set amount of money determined? Yet, these schemes are busy investing. We should come up with a scheme whereby we are able to do, and I will bring up a statement here, or a motion, to be able to investigate these retirement schemes, to see how many members do you have. If you have 10,000 members, how are you paying these 10,000 members? Are you paying these 10,000 members based on a scheme or a particular amount that you've set that they will receive for the rest of their life? Or are you paying them based on how much you are making from your investments? If you take, for instance, even Kenya Power as an example, I know they have built houses, and the retirement scheme agency have built houses in Karen. Those houses are being sold for about 103 million. A lot of cabinet secretaries have bought those houses. Those houses belong to that scheme, pension scheme. But who is benefiting, Mr. Speaker? Who is making, when the payments are being made, is a staffer of Kenya Power who has contributed to that scheme, benefiting from the money which the scheme is getting after they sold those houses. We just need to be a little bit objective. We also need to know that these schemes which are being introduced, that we sit here and we pass laws to be able to establish them, we are not creating jobs and something which in Britain they call a hole in the wall, like an ATM. for the CEOs and the board members always to be milking it, going in there and just getting money. It will be prudent for us to know as a country whether the amount of money contributed by the assemblies, when they now transfer, on that money is transferred to this new scheme, which is being proposed by the majority leader. We will want to know what does the balance sheet say? How much has been deducted from their salaries? How is that money being invested? And what benefits are they getting? Mr. Speaker, I know most of us are businessmen here and women. You know very well that you've invested about 1 million shillings. You expect to be able to get at minimum, 30% in terms of profit. So over time, maybe you've worked for 30 years. Those 30 years that you've worked for, how much can you equate it for? That money, if it has been deducted from your salary and it is put in that pension scheme, has that money remained as 10,000 shillings? Or has that money been now used by the management of that scheme to be able to make business? Because it's money you are lending them. That money, you are not just putting it in an escrow account for you to be able to get that money tomorrow. We want to ensure that you continue living a good life. So unless we rain down on these pension schemes, we will not be doing anything. We will just be creating jobs for a CEO, creating jobs for a chairperson, creating jobs for our friends who becomes members. Mr. Speaker, when you look at Section 5 of this bill, I'm just going to read it. It says, upon commencement of this act, contributions required to be made under subsection 1 and 3 shall be deducted by a sponsor from the salary of the member in each month on which the salary is paid, and shall be paid into the scheme together with the sponsor's contribution before the 10th day of every calendar month, or before any other day which may be notified in writing or approved by the authority. Mr. Speaker, I would wish that the majority leader will expound this section and says that the authority shall take cognizance of the fact that sometimes the exchequer delays in remitting the money. So, Mr. Speaker, I can see the time is running up and you're trying to eat into my time. But it's okay. But I wish that, my dear friend, you will, on this particular last sentence, which I'm going to try and highlight, where you say that, or any other day which may be notified in writing or approved by authority. I think you should go back to the function of the authority and indicate that they have to be cognizant of the delays by the exchequer. In fact, even editing this clause could be that upon receipt of the money by the assembly from the exchequer, because that's something you can be able to prove. Today we are here debating, we are still waiting, I'm sure you're going to be tabling Kara, you know, for us to be able to divide money among us the 47 counties. Mr. Speaker, let me not say what I was about to say. But let me finish with that one point, because I know you really want to table Kara. I think change this clause, please. Make sure that we deny these pension schemes the interest and the penalties that they are using around to say Mandera County owes them 6 billion. Yet maybe the principal amount is only 20 million. Because the amount of money that they are using now to be able to go into counties and say, let us agree on asset swaps, is based on that interest and penalties. So finally, Mr. Speaker, as I promise, I will bring a motion to this House to be able to audit all these pension schemes, to be able to get value for money. All Kenyans, teachers who are retired, even previous members of the county assemblies who have retired, their money, either money which has been paid to NSSF, their money which has been paid to Lab Fund or Lab Trust, has got to be calculated based on the amount of benefit that those schemes have been able to get using that money. So if I've contributed, hypothetically, if someone has contributed about 3 million based on their work, what is the value of that 3 million compared to how much these schemes have benefited from that 3 million? It cannot be that the schemes have billions of shillings worth of properties, yet their own contributors are languishing in poverty. It can't. I support, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Olekina. Honorable members, there being no other member desirous of contributing to this particular bill, I call upon the mover to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really want to appreciate colleagues who've taken time to speak to this bill on their thoughts of how we can better manage the pension schemes of our county assembly. Senator Ledama, you raised very valid concerns about what we do with our pension funds, both for county assemblies, for public servants that is managed under they created a big institution, I think called superannuation something. And actually there's an act for it. What I want us to do, Senator Ledama, you can bring the motion for audit of these institutions, the payout they make, that will be fine. But this one particularly for county assemblies, many of the issues that you raise, we can actually address them by way of amendment, because this is just second reading that you're considering and we are hearing thoughts about it, because it's just trying to ensure the same way you and me eventually, when you retire from this house, because you've served your second term, Senator Ledama, one day you'll earn pension, you know, and at least you'll have some decent comfort. We have made life so comfortable for us, Senator Ledama. I don't know now. No, I don't think it's going to work. I was to mention to you that we had even secured a medical scheme for retired members of parliament, only that have remembered that SHA does not have exclusions. They don't have that kind of deals with institutions. No, they don't. I can tell you. We were at the presentation today, and I am aware. The reason why they cannot have that is that it's a single benefit for all the members. There's standardization of cost and what you can, you need to pay. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to propose that colleagues who have thoughts on how we can improve this to ensure that our members of our county assembly live decent life, unlike those that serve in the defunct local authorities, where many of our councillors, when you meet them today, Mr. Speaker, they keep on calling back to us and said, my good friends, we did our bit, we saved the country, we tried whatever we could to make this nation a better place, but unfortunately, we have been left in the cold. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to urge colleagues that when we get to reading the report of the committee, we could still play around and consider what we can do better. Mr. Speaker, we don't even have to take the members of county assemblies to a new pension fund. We could reduce this and ensure that there's a criteria upon which you determine how and where they actually get their pension fund services from, and set a high bar for them. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, I beg to reply and thank colleagues that have contributed. Mr. Speaker, lastly, I want to request that in accordance with Standing Order number 66.3, we defer the putting of a question until a further date. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Majority Leader. In regards to the application made, the putting of the question on this particular bill is deferred to the next sitting of this House. I would like in the circumstance to call upon the Chairperson of Finance and Budget, Senator Robert, to table the report that he has.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the Senate today, 3rd of December 2024. That's the report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on the consideration of the Presidential Memorandum of referral of the County Allocation of Revenue Bill 2024, Senate Bills number 25 of 2024. I beg to lay.
Honorable members, you may rise. Honorable Senators, it is now 6:30 p.m. Time to adjourn the Senate. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until tomorrow, Wednesday, 4th of December 2024 at 9:30 a.m.